Chapter 1851. Xiaoyu, have you encountered any difficulties recently? After the court session ended, Jiang Pingji discussed trivial matters with the ministers. When everyone dispersed, she asked Su Ku to stay for a private conversation. Su Ku looked puzzled. I have nothing important recently. Your Majesty suddenly asked about this? I'm confused. Jiang Pingji pointed at the few memorials piled on the desk and said to Su Ku with a heavy expression, "These memorials are all against you." At a rough glance, there were at least a dozen books. Su Ku was a low-key official. Although he was one of the most important officials, he rarely caused trouble. The imperial censor couldn't find anything to use against him even if they wanted to, unlike Feng Zhen, who had an average of more than 20 books every month for the past year. If it wasn't for problems with his speech, then it was for his behavior. If it wasn't for the fact that he had too many problems with government affairs, Feng Zhen was covered in lice. Su Ku had always been the imperial censor's forbidden area. They wouldn't be able to pick out any mistakes even if they stayed there for half a year. The contents of the memorials were very uniform. They were roughly divided into two types. One type said that Su Ku didn't go home after work and wandered around. This was not the role model a good official should have. One said that Su Ku had a mistress outside even though he hadn't taken a concubine, which seriously damaged the positive image of the court in the new era. As the saying goes, cultivate one's moral character, govern one's family, govern one's country, and bring peace to the world. They felt that Su Ku should be punished for having a mistress outside when he didn't even figure out his own affairs. Jiang Pingji was dumbfounded. She didn't know if it was because the political situation was too stable or because everyone had nothing better to do, but the imperial censors were gossiping like paparazzi. Although it was their duty, Jiang Pingji felt helpless every time she saw trivial gossip piled up on her desk. She gave the imperial censors a lot of power to speak and allowed them to participate in memorials to the emperor and the people. This was so that they could be the supervisory body of the court and constantly remind the emperor and the officials to pay attention to their words and morals. But as time went by, the style seemed to have changed. Of course, this wasn't the point. The imperial censor's enthusiasm couldn't be dampened. Jiang Pingji could only swallow 10,000 curses in her heart. The most important thing was that the person who was implicated was Su Ku. Considering the years of trust between the emperor and the minister, Jiang Pingji didn't publish it for the time being. She planned to find the person involved to understand the situation. Not only was Su Ku an important minister, but he was also an old minister. He had to maintain his dignity, and Jiang Pingji could not disregard his dignity just because of a trivial matter. That was why the scene above happened. Su Ku looked at the pile of memorials and realized the severity of the situation. Jiang Pingji said, "The imperial censor wouldn't make things up, but I didn't completely believe it. There must be a reason for this, so I came to ask you about it." Su Ku sighed. "This is my fault. I didn't handle my family affairs well and let them taint your Majesty's ears." Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. Her eyes were filled with unfriendliness. "Did you really have an affair like what the memorials said? Did you come here to make trouble?" Wait a minute. It was as if they were not talking about the same thing. Su Ku asked, "What mistress? What did these imperial censors report to him?" Jiang Pingji briefly explained it, and Su Ku was almost frightened by the imperial censor's logic. "Xiaoyu, although Xuanmei is no longer young, she is still your wife who has accompanied you for many years. She takes care of your aunt, takes care of your children, and takes care of everything in the mansion so that you don't have to worry about anything. She has given birth to your children. She didn't complain when you were away for so many years. Even if she doesn't have any merits, she has worked hard. If you really had an affair behind her back, wouldn't that make her lose face?" Jiang Pingji seriously criticized and educated Su Ku. In the early days of the Jiang dynasty, the marriage laws were also further divided and adjusted. Men could have concubines as long as they met the requirements. Their ancestors had a powerful background, or they themselves were powerful, or their wives were infertile. Men could have a concubine when they were over 30 years old, but the requirements were still relatively stringent. Su Ku had the right to have a concubine, but he didn't bring her home. Instead, he hid it, and in the end, the mistress and the mistress came to make trouble. This hurt Xuanmei twice. If word got out, not only would people say that Su Ku was unscrupulous, but they would also say that Xuanmei was not good at all and that her usual attitude was fake. If it was light, people would gossip about her, and if it was heavy, her reputation would be ruined. Su Ku was not a muddle-headed person, but why did he make such a mistake on this matter? Your Majesty, this matter? I'm also wronged. There is no mistress or mistress, there is nothing. There was a rather strange phenomenon. It was hard to say for the officials outside, but the officials in the capital were more restrained and didn't have many concubines in their backyards. In the previous dynasty, it was common for an official to have 3 or 4 concubines, and there might be 6 or 7 who had no status to warm their feet. But now, firstly, the emperor was a female. Secondly, the marriage laws were more mature and detailed about concubines, so there were fewer loopholes to exploit. Most of the concubines in the backyards of the officials in the capital were there before the founding of the country. After the founding of the country, the number of concubines declined sharply. For senior and important officials like Su Ku, who had qualifications and lived in the heart of the emperor, most of them only had one wife in their backyards. Of course, there was no lack of those who got rid of their old wives when they were in power. As a result, the old wife went to the imperial censor and the ex-husband was fired. When Han Yu, the crazy man, revised the marriage laws, he emphasized one rule. Those who were first lowly and then noble were not allowed to marry. What did that mean? It meant that if a man was a poor man before he married his wife, he was not allowed to divorce his wife after he became rich, unless his wife committed a serious crime. Of course, when he revised the marriage laws for the 3rd time, Han Yu added a few more words. Those who were first lowly and then noble were not allowed to marry. The reason for the revision was that there were scumbags among the female officials, and their husbands were too weak. Han Yu thought that the husband and wife should unite on this kind of issue. It was everyone's responsibility to protect the weak. Anyway, according to the newly revised marriage laws, Su Ku's behavior was against the law. Not only would he be fined, but he would also be demoted and forced to reflect on his mistakes. Jiang Pingji didn't fully believe what he said. Private friendship was private friendship. As a friend, Jiang Pingji naturally believed Su Ku. But as an emperor, she treated her officials fairly and would not be partial to Su Ku or the imperial censor. Go ahead. Su Ku started to talk and poured out his grievances. Did those meddlesome imperial censors think that he was willing to get off work and not go home? He was forced to not go home. It was said that the mistress in the mansion was not a mistress, and the mistress was not a mistress. Then who is she? Su Ku said, she is the daughter of my aunt's widowed sister's eldest daughter. In terms of seniority, she is my distant niece. Jiang Pingji said, a cousin is a 3,000-mile relationship. Su Ku felt a little wronged after hearing her complaints. It was stressful for an official to have such a vexing emperor. How did your distant niece become your mistress? Su Ku sighed. The old lady in the mansion is old and likes to stay with the younger generation. She is soft-hearted and kind. She couldn't help but help when she saw this relative was living a miserable life. The old lady is kind-hearted, but I didn't expect her to be so ambitious. I guess she was blinded by the prosperity of the capital and had thoughts that she shouldn't have. Anyway, I can't drive her away for fear that she will make a fuss in front of the old lady. The old lady has been spoiled for so many years that she doesn't care about other people's business. I don't want to put her in a difficult position. So, I have to move out for a few days. Su Ku's mother passed away when he was young. The only female elder who was close to him was his aunt. His aunt was also unfortunate. She lost her husband when she was young and had no children. She devoted her motherly love to Su Ku and treated him like her own child. His aunt was the old lady with the highest status in the mansion. Su Ku had always treated her like a filial son. After so many years, even if they weren't mother and son, they were more like mother and son. The old lady was old and didn't know how many more days she could enjoy in her later years. Seeing that the old lady had a poor relative, she wanted to help them. Su Ku naturally agreed and discussed with Xuanmei to bring them over. Speaking of which, his aunt's niece also had a hard life. She lost her husband when she was young and struggled to survive with her daughter alone. Her daughter also had a hard life. She married a gangster and her husband was beaten to death by debt collectors. His aunt's niece was very insecure about everything she had. She always felt that her current wealth and glory were all because of Su Ku's aunt. Once the old lady passed away, she, her daughter, and her young granddaughter would definitely be driven away. Thus, she had a crooked idea. She heard that the mistress of the mansion, Xuanmei, was a maidservant and looked down on her. Even a maidservant could become the wife of the current minister of revenue. It shouldn't be a problem for his daughter to be a concubine, right? After Su Ke got off work, he often saw his niece, who was extremely beautiful, casting flirtatious glances at him, both overtly and covertly. As a smart person, Su Ke understood. She wanted to seduce him. "I'll hide outside for 2 days. Ask the old lady what's going on. If she still doesn't understand, send her out." This was what Su Ke discussed with his wife. Xuanmei said, "You're not accepting them?" Su Ke said, "Why should I accept them? It's not as simple as adding a pair of chopsticks to the house. The more people there are, the more trouble there will be. I'm already worried about the mother and daughter. If I accept them, won't the mansion be peaceful? If my children find out, how can I, as an old father, feel?" For an ordinary man, taking in a concubine was like raising a pet and adding a pair of chopsticks. However, it wasn't that simple to carry it out. For example, one of the assistant ministers of the Ministry of Personnel had a falling out with his wife. In a fit of anger, the wife said that she only cared about the food, drinks, housing, and transportation of the family, and didn't care about the concubines or foot warmers. She said that the husband should take care of the concubines or foot warmers. It was because the assistant minister didn't understand women and his wife's son was wronged that she exploded. The unlucky man was angered by his wife's words and said that his wife didn't need to care about the concubines or foot warmers. Then, the matter was exposed by the imperial censor. The officials of the court also witnessed the miserable days of the assistant minister working during the day and taking care of the concubines' food, clothing, housing, and transportation at night. It was also this wife who started it. The other wives followed suit after seeing the effect. It was their duty to take care of their parents-in-law, raise their children, and take care of the household. However, the concubines were the husband's assets and were considered extra work. The wife took care of the concubines and the concubines' children. Even if it wasn't meritorious, it was hard work. The wife should be given an extra salary. If she couldn't afford it, she would take care of it herself. However, this evil trend was recognized and supported by the emperor. The officials of the court were speechless. They cursed the assistant minister 10,000 times in their hearts. Su Ke didn't have the intention to take in a concubine. He looked down on the daughter of his aunt's younger sister. If it wasn't for the old lady, Su Ke would have chased them away. He didn't expect the imperial censor to expose him while he was hiding. This matter was more serious. Jiang Pengji rested her chin on her hand and said, "If this is true, the imperial censor will have to rectify it." The imperial censor wasn't a paparazzi. The content of the report should be detailed and true. He shouldn't make up gossip, distort the truth, and increase her workload. As for Su Ke, it was better to let him go back and deal with the mess at home. It wasn't good to have such a scandal at his age. Su Ke could only go home with a bitter face. After a few days, the house was quiet. Of course, it wasn't Su Ke who settled it, nor was it Sun Mei. It was the old lady who took the initiative to let the relatives leave. She gave them money and sent them away. The old lady said, "I thought it would be good to take care of the relatives. It would be fun to be a family, but I can't let it affect your business." Su Ke was speechless. Sun Mei asked, "How did you know about this?" "I heard it when I went out to play cards with a few old sisters. You and your wife are the same. This matter concerns Jin Er's future. Why hide it from me? I'm old and I'm sensitive, but I can tell right from wrong. I'm embarrassed by my old sister's words." The old lady felt wronged. Sun Mei and Su Ke could only lower their heads and admit their mistakes. The storm passed just like that. Su Ke was ordered to write a memorial to reflect on himself. The imperial censor who submitted the memorial was also pulled away by the emperor to criticize and educate him. At this time, Feng Yi, who had traveled around for many years and made many achievements, returned to the capital. Feng Zhen happily went to the emperor to find out what was going on. By relying on her outstanding achievements in the impoverished counties that she had been sent out for nearly 10 years, Feng Yi was able to obtain a high official position in the capital. In the end, censor? Censor? Why did he become an imperial censor? Jiang Pingji said, he admonishes the emperor and supervises the officials. What's wrong with being an imperial censor? The imperial censors of the Jiang dynasty could not only stay in the capital to keep an eye on the officials, but they could also be sent out to supervise various places. Feng Zhen was speechless. As someone who was dissed by the imperial censor every day, wasn't it troublesome for the eldest son of the legal wife to become an imperial censor? If his son did not do well, he would lose face. If his son climbed to the top of the imperial censor, he would be even more annoyed. It was troublesome no matter what. Why can't my eldest son get over it? Jiang Pingji pouted. Look at the province that Feng Yi is in charge of inspecting. Feng Zhen felt even more annoyed. That was the place where his daughter-in-law was appointed, or perhaps Feng Yi, this unfilial son, ran to become an imperial censor just to form a couple with his wife? He cared about his wife and ignored his father. If outsiders knew that Feng Zhen's eldest son became an imperial censor, how could he mingle in front of the officials? I definitely don't agree to this. I definitely don't agree. Feng Zhen pulled his son over to give him a serious lecture as soon as he returned home. Feng Yi did not move and secretly gave his younger brother, Feng Yu, a look. Feng Yu understood and took advantage of his father's rage to sneak out to get help. The moment his mother made a move, it was clear whether she was real or not. This time, it was Feng Zhen's turn to be lectured. What's wrong with being an imperial censor? Is it a disgrace to the Feng family? Although the rank of an imperial censor was not high, not everyone could become one. The requirements were stricter than ordinary officials. Not only did one have to forget personal interests and country, but one also had to be upright, straightforward, and daring to speak his mind. They had to be knowledgeable, be familiar with government affairs, and be knowledgeable about the past and present. Feng Yi was able to become an imperial censor at such a young age, so he had a solid foundation. His only regret was that he offended too many people. If Feng Yi could become an imperial censor, it would mean that the emperor had high recognition of his abilities and knowledge. Feng Zhen was an old man. The older he got, the more confused he became. Feng Yi silently followed his younger brother out of the door. It was inconvenient for the son to be present when his father was being lectured by his wife. After all, his father was very prideful. Are you close to His Highness Yen? His younger brother nodded. It's a blessing to be valued by His Highness. Don't let your guard down. Feng Yi caressed her brother's head. My little brother is getting cuter and cuter. Asterisk, Feng Yi nodded and smiled innocently. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Chapter 1852. If Han Yu were to rank the most attractive officials in the court, he would definitely be in the top 5, if not the top 3. If he were to go back more than 10 years, he would probably be number 1 when he was in the prime of his youth. Even though he was in his 40s, he took good care of himself. Not only did his appearance not deteriorate, but it also became more and more mellow like a fine wine. Of course, being an official in the Jiang dynasty was different from the past. In the past, Han Yu might have been able to climb to the position of one of the 3 chancellors and 9 ministers with a smooth career. In today's world, he could only rely on his talent. As for his appearance, it was fine as long as his facial features were regular. Fortunately, Han Yu was not only good-looking, but also talented and capable. His conduct was also top-notch. Even so, Han Yu was the least popular among the officials. Most of the officials who were willing to make friends with him were his friends when they were young. Why was that? In terms of official position, Han Yu was also an important official in the emperor's heart. He was in charge of the Ministry of Penalty, one of the 6 ministries. He was in charge of the justice and prisons of the country. In the previous dynasty, the Ministry of Penalty didn't have much power. Only civilians or officials below the 7th rank had the power to punish them. The Supreme Court had the power to punish them. The middle and senior officials were also tortured by other departments, and the Ministry of Penalty couldn't be locked up. But in the Jiang dynasty, the Ministry of Penalty was a proper department with real power. Almost all the officials except for the imperial censor didn't want to provoke it. It was one of the 3 departments in charge of the final trial and review of major cases. In addition to being in charge of the Ministry of Penalty, Han Yu also had other titles. At the same time, he was also in charge of the Supreme Court. In terms of real power, Han Yu was definitely the most powerful person in the early years of the Jiang dynasty. He even dared to confront Qiguan Rang. Most importantly, the emperor was on Han Yu's side. Such a person should be flattered and flattered by everyone. They should be eager to trample on the threshold of others. Why was Han Yu so unpopular? Because his main job was not only to try criminal cases, but also to lead the drafting of national laws. Which official dared to say that he was clean? It wasn't that the officials were bad, but their families, the servants in the mansions, the relatives of the servants in the mansions, the messy distant relatives and neighbors all liked to use chicken feathers as an arrow of authority. Even if these officials wanted to restrain them, they couldn't guarantee that there would be no problems. Once something went wrong and they were caught by Han Yu, they would be punished and educated if they were lucky, or demoted to another place if they were unlucky. It was common for people to lose their lives. For example, there was once an official's brother-in-law who committed a crime. According to the old law, he should be able to escape punishment. Even if he didn't lose his limbs, at least he would be able to keep his life. In the end, Han Yu wrote a petition saying that the old law was problematic. If the old law was followed, the victims would die in vain and the common people would complain about the court. Therefore, he suggested that the case be reviewed. The old law was right in the past, but it was not perfect today. Basically, those who were retried in Han Yu's hands were doomed. The brother-in-law of an official was executed by 1,000 cuts in public. His wife's younger brother was the only male member of the Yu clan. The official's wife cried, threw a tantrum, and even wanted to hang herself. Because of this, the official was implicated by the imperial censor and was even reprimanded and demoted. Examples like this could be found everywhere. Han Yu had offended almost everyone in the imperial court. Unfortunately, the other party had His Majesty as his backer. Even the imperial censor, who was usually disrespectful to the heavens and earth, did not dare to provoke him. The other officials could only avoid him. They couldn't afford to provoke this fiend, but couldn't they just hide from it? It turned out that Han Yu would set them up even if they tried to hide from him. Just the marriage law alone. This fellow had petitioned His Majesty to amend it 3 times. Men, after all, always had a bit of a bad habit. For example, there were 3 big happy events in the folk jokes: promotion, wealth, and death of wife smiley face. Angle, promotion and wealth were needless to say. Death of wife was a justifiable reason to get rid of his wife and replace her with a young, beautiful, well-educated woman who was worthy of him. Even if his old wife could not die, he still wanted to get 3 or 4 concubines and 6 or 7 to warm his feet. He wanted to experience the comfort and novelty of being a groom every night. As a result, Han Yu had collected thousands of marriage case files and obtained the marriage laws of the previous dynasties. He had revised the marriage laws 3 times according to the current situation of the Jiang dynasty. He clearly marked the places that were more vague and could be exploited, and subdivided the various regulations. Just the rule that those who are first lowly and then noble are not allowed to go was enough to stop many big pigtrotters from thinking of changing to a younger wife. How many legal wives did he support? Not only could they not change their wives at will, but they also couldn't take concubines at will. Taking concubines, no matter if they were cheap concubines, good concubines, noble concubines, or unnamed legal wives, either their ancestors or themselves had to be awesome. If they couldn't meet these 2 requirements, they could only take a concubine when they were over 30 years old and their legal wife had no children. In the early years of the Jiang dynasty, surgical skills had developed quite well. There were also certain treatments for diseases such as smallpox, and the neonatal mortality rate was the lowest in history every year. As for these marriage laws, the ministers had no solid reason to oppose them. Of course, there were policies and countermeasures. There were still some men who wanted to touch young and beautiful girls, and they could only turn a blind eye to them. But if there were irrefutable evidence such as sons and daughters of concubines, things would be different. To sum up, Han Yu was indeed the most unlikable minister with enemies everywhere. In sharp contrast to Han Yu's bad relationship with others, his wife, Madame Tao, was invincible in diplomacy. She was the leader in the circle of noble ladies in the capital. Han Yu was so busy that he couldn't go home for a few times a year, so it was inevitable that he neglected the family. His wife, Madame Tao, had some conflicts with him, but she was good at taking care of the family, so Han Yu was naturally at ease. After a few years, Han Yu's busy work came to an end. He was asked to stay in the hall by the emperor for a private talk. Let's not talk about official affairs today. Let's talk about the private affairs of the family. The emperor looked serious. Han Yu was confused. After all, a private talk in the hall was usually a benefit for officials who made mistakes. Please go ahead, Your Majesty. Jiang Pingji said, Yen is getting old. I'm going to find a study partner for her. Young friends can be her right-hand man in the future. I'm sure you're aware of this. I intend to let Wenbin's youngest son, Han Qi, study with Yen. How do you teach your son? She said the first sentence with a kind face, but the last sentence was full of anger. Han Yu's heart skipped a beat. Today, I'm not talking to you as an emperor, but as a mother. Han Yu had been with Jiang Pingji for many years. He knew her temperament very well. As long as she didn't show any killing intent, it meant that the situation was serious, but it hadn't escalated to the level of political affairs. Since she said it was a private affair, it should be a private affair. Han Yu didn't know what happened, but he knew that he should apologize first. Jiang Pingji felt helpless and angry. She promoted Han Yu's youngest son, Han Qi, for Han Yu's sake. But this guy secretly humiliated Yen, and Yen heard it from the other side of the wall. She had never seen such a stupid person. He didn't even know how to be careful with his words in the palace. Hadn't he heard that walls have ears? When her daughter crossed out Han Qi's name, Jiang Pingji specifically asked. After all, promoting Han Qi was to show respect to his father, Han Yu. Jiang Yen sneered. My background is not worthy of his nobility. Jiang Pingji was furious when she heard that. She sent someone to investigate and found out that Han Qi was very serious when he entered the palace for the examination, but after the examination he laughed privately with his peers and belittled Jiang Yen in a disdainful tone. Jiang Yen happened to come over to check on her future study partner. She heard the whole thing from the other side of the wall. Jiang Yen had excellent self-restraint. Although she was young, she didn't show her emotions. She removed Han Qi from the list without any nonsense. Jiang Pingji would promote Han Qi for Han Yu's sake because the two of them had been rulers and ministers for many years. It was reasonable for her to take care of him. However, Jiang Yen was the only heir to the throne. Why would she give Han Qi face? Who was Han Qi anyway? Therefore, Jiang Pingji prepared for 2 days. She waited for Han Yu to finish his work before she asked him to stay in the hall for a private talk. How did she teach her son? Han Yu listened to Jiang Pingji and his face turned pale. He directly knelt down and pretended to ask for forgiveness. He said that he would discipline his youngest son well when he returned and then bring him to Jiang Yen to ask for forgiveness. If Han Qi really went too far, Han Yu would break his legs. Not long ago, Bai Yuexia broke her son Shi Yu's legs with a rod and she divorced her husband. Outsiders didn't know the reason, but Han Yu knew something. Bai Yuexia dragged her son out of the Golden Scale Academy and broke his legs. It was His Majesty's order. It was most likely that Shi Yu had done something wrong that made His Majesty furious. At that time, Han Yu felt that Bai Yuexia did not teach her son well. Now it was his turn. What kind of sin did he commit? Jiang Pingji said, Han Qi's matter is still a small matter. Han Yu's face showed bitterness. That bastard disrespected the crown prince and humiliated the crown prince and the emperor. That was still a small matter? Han Yu was anxious. He didn't know what was a big matter. Jiang Pingji said, "Go back and inform your Yu family. Let them know that I know what they did in private." It should be said that Jiang Pingji had known it for a long time. Han Yu and Madame Tao of the Yu family had resumed their old business of selling illegal salt. Madame Tao quickly amassed wealth through the illegal salt business and occupied the people's land. After Jiang Pingji recruited Han Yu, she beat Madame Tao up. She cut off Madame Tao's illegal salt business and took away the people's land that they illegally occupied. Everything had been peaceful for many years. At first, Madame Tao was trembling with fear. She was afraid of Jiang Pingji's force and didn't dare to do anything. However, as Han Yu gained more power in the court, he could still be favored by the emperor by dissing the officials. Madame Tao began to get restless and began to resume her old business. Han Yu's face was so pale that ink could drip from it. "Do you know when it started, Your Majesty?" Jiang Pingji said, "It has been a while, but I kept it a secret. Madame Tao is a clown, but I can't implicate you." Han Yu was hated by hundreds of officials, but he was still alive and kicking because Jiang Pingji had been helping him behind his back. She even cleaned up other officials' dirty tricks when necessary. But Madame Tao was Han Yu's mother, so Jiang Pingji didn't have to be so polite. She took the initiative to reveal it to Han Yu. If Madame Tao made too much trouble, Jiang Pingji had to get rid of the tumor, even if it would slightly implicate Han Yu. Han Yu was her baby. Who was Madame Tao? "I am ashamed." Jiang Pingji said, "Let's not talk about it. You can leave now." It was destined to be a chaotic day. When Han Yu got home, he immediately punished Han Qi, who was usually spoiled, was beaten until he screamed in pain. Madame Tao didn't care about her manners as a noble lady. She almost ran to stop Han Yu. "Han Wenbin, why did you beat my son?" Han Yu said, "He slandered the crown prince's background as a bandit and said he was a lowly person." "Did he say that?" Han Qi's face changed. A guilty look flashed across his chubby and cute face. Han Run, the eldest son, said, "Isn't it known to the whole world?" As soon as he said that, his father, who had always been kind to him, slapped him for the first time. His face was tilted to one side. "Is it because of you?" Han Yu asked someone to catch Madame Tao. "What a coincidence. Both of you are punished by the family discipline. It's time to teach them a lesson." Han Run retorted angrily, "Teach what? I haven't been home for years. What can you teach me?" Han Yu felt like he was struck by lightning. "You are two unfilial sons." When did he not teach them? When Han Yu was at home, the two sons were the ones he cared about the most. Han Run was forced to kneel down, but he still didn't give in. He said angrily and resentfully, "Unfilial sons? That's a good scolding. Do you know how much my brother and I have been implicated by you in the academy all these years? You have a good reputation outside. You have offended countless officials and we have been bullied again and again in the academy. You don't even know this. Now you are disciplining me and my brother for not knowing our duty." Of course, Han Run was resentful. How much had he and his brothers suffered in the Golden Scale Academy? His father was fearless in dissing the officials, but they were ridiculed by the children of the officials. Han Run was resentful. He also hated Jiang Pingji for entrusting his father with such an important task, but she had attracted so much hatred, which had implicated his brother. He was even angrier when he heard that his brother was going to be chosen as the study companion of the crown prince. Wasn't it enough that he and his brother were being hated by others? Now he was punishing his brother for the sake of the crown prince. Who did he think he was? Did he think he was the emperor? Han Yu looked at his son, who looked familiar but had a strange temperament. He was so angry that he almost fainted. "Who taught you these words?" At this time, Mrs. Tao waved away the people who were trying to stop her. She protected her baby son who was crying with snot and tears all over his face. "I taught them personally." "What? Are you going to punish me in front of the servants?" Han Yu was so angry that he almost fainted. He couldn't even stand steadily. He was too tired from work and experienced such an exciting scene when he came home. He was already an Iron Man who didn't collapse. I will deal with you later. That day, the Han's mansion was in a mess. The imperial censor who heard the news did not go there. But the emperor was watching. Han Yu interrupted Mrs. Tao's illicit salt business as soon as she tasted the sweetness. He had thought that this matter would end like this, but a year and a half later, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Tao colluded with the gentry to rebel. After investigation, it was found that Han Yu's wife, Mrs. Tao, was involved and played a very important role. She made great contributions to the rebellion. Not only that, Han Yu's eldest son, Han Run, and his second son, Han Qi, were also involved. Their crimes were unforgivable. Because of this, Han Yu's house was confiscated. The leader of the confiscation was Fu Wang. He used to be Han Yu's enemy and they still didn't get along. If Han Yu was the leader of the civil officials, then Fu Wang was the leader of the generals, and he was the absolute leader. The two had been enemies for many years, and now it was finally over. The emperor has protected you for so many years, but you still made such a mistake. I really don't know what to say. Fu Wang led the team in person. Of course, he was ordered by Jiang Pingji not to be rude to the people of Han's mansion, especially Han Yu. Of course, Fu Wang couldn't be presumptuous with this order. But it was still okay to say a few words to get back at Han Yu. Han Yu, who was dressed in plain clothes, sneered indifferently. Han Yu has been loyal to the emperor all his life. How can he be compared to your good reputation as a minister of several families? You and I know very well whether there is a rebellion or not. Fu Wang was so angry that his face turned black. Damn it, Han Yu is such a bastard. That night, Jiang Pingji met Han Yu in person. Han Run and Han Qi will be sent to the frontier and will never be able to return home. The Tao family will be executed. Han Yu asked, "What about me?" "I never break my promise," Jiang Pingji said. "I will never change my promise to you." Han Yu shook his head. "Your Majesty, this is favoritism. If you are like this, what is the purpose of justice?" Jiang Pingji said, "But you are not involved in the rebellion. You don't deserve to die." Han Yu smiled and bowed to her. "The most fortunate thing in my life is to meet your Majesty and gain your Majesty's trust." Jiang Pingji stood still and looked at Han Yu for a long time. "Wenbin," Han Yu said, "it is my fault that I failed to teach my children and restrain my relatives. I can't defend myself." He knew that Jiang Pingji wanted to protect him. But he also knew that she couldn't. Someone was trying to overthrow the country. Madame Tao and Han Yu's three closest people were involved. It was impossible for him to be innocent in the eyes of the outside world. If Han Yu was innocent, not only would the laws of the Jiang dynasty be ridiculed, but the emperor would also be criticized by the later generations. Apart from that, there were many people in the court who wanted him dead. The emperor could suppress those voices, but it was not good for the court in the long run. It was not a wise emperor's choice to lose the overall situation for one person. He wanted justice, but the person who should be the most impartial was favoritism. If the emperor really did that, he would be trampling on the path that Han Yu had been pursuing for half his life. Han Yu said, "It's getting late. Your Majesty has a court meeting tomorrow. Go back to the palace first. I have nothing to do here." Jiang Pingji looked at his face deeply. "Wenbin," Han Yu smiled. "I know what I am doing. Your Majesty, don't worry." Jiang Pingji went back to the palace. Han Yu looked at the empty mansion. He washed his face, combed his hair, and put on the grandest clothes. Looking at the old man in the mirror, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. His life was full of ups and downs. When he was young, he had a good life. Who would have thought that he would be involved in a disaster? His family was confiscated, and Han Yu fell from heaven to hell overnight. It was like a reincarnation that couldn't be broken. Decades later, the family that he had painstakingly maintained also ended up being confiscated and exterminated. It was like a joke. He couldn't tell if he should hate himself or others. He ground the ink for himself and wrote a long letter of confession with a brush. Han Yu knew very well that his reputation would be ruined if the confession was made public. He would be nailed to the pillar of shame and be reviled by the later generations. But it didn't matter. When I am dead, I don't care about the flood behind me, Han Yu laughed at himself. He took out a hidden gold ingot from his sleeve and swallowed it. When the sky was bright, his body was already cold when the servants found him. Another 10 years later, the new emperor ascended to the throne. He followed his mother's last wish and overturned the case for Han Yu. Chapter 1853. Han Qi. My Han Ernyang, why are you throwing a tantrum again? It took the eldest son of the Qiguan family a long time to find Han Qi hiding in the rockery in the garden of the academy. The teenager hid in the rockery and wiped his tears. His cute baby face was covered with tear stains and his eyes were as red as a rabbit's. Who are you calling Han Ernyang? If you call me that again, I'll complain to Uncle Qiguan. Han Qi roared back angrily when he heard the rude address. The next second he burped and ruined the little momentum. Okay, I was wrong. I won't call you Han Ernyang anymore. Han Qi's eyes widened, but he forgot why he was crying just now after being interrupted by his friend. Speaking of Han Qi, he was also a bully in class. It wasn't that he was rude and unreasonable. On the contrary, his personality was very soft, and his looks belonged to the type that could be easily bullied. This caused his older brother, Han Run, and his siblings to be worried. When they sent Han Qi to school, they threatened the entire class. 3 graduates of the Golden Scale Academy supported Han Qi, who in the class dared to provoke him. Not to mention bullying him in public, they had to think twice even if they wanted to run against him in secret. Han Run was still worried. He used his connections and asked the second generation he knew to take care of Han Qi at the same time. He told Han Qi, no matter who in the class says that you scold you or bully you, you can go home and complain. I'm sure you'll beat them up so badly that their own mothers won't recognize them and let our father bully their parents. He had a father that he couldn't afford to offend, 3 siblings that he couldn't afford to offend, and his second-generation friends that protected him. Almost no one dared to do anything to Han Qi. There were occasional conflicts, but Han Qi didn't suffer much. His life of studying in the Golden Scale Academy was quite relaxing. However, this relaxed atmosphere was soon broken. Han Qi saw his biological mother, Madame Tao, whom he hadn't seen for a few years. Madame Tao remarried a few years after she divorced Han Yu. She was now the second wife of someone else, managing the household and taking care of the legitimate children of her husband's ex-wife as well as her husband's illegitimate children. After a few years, she had aged and haggard. In order to consolidate her position in the backyard, she gave birth to another child in her early 40s, but the current husband obviously favored the legitimate children of his ex-wife. Madame Tao had no choice but to set her sights on her ex-husband's 2 sons. Han Run had been sent out to gain experience. The older he got, the more he had his own ideas. He was not close to his birth mother at all. Han Qi was different. He had a soft temperament, and this was the time when he longed for the care and concern of an elder. In this world, who else could he rely on more than his birth mother? After all, Han Qi was the flesh and blood she gave birth to after being pregnant for 10 months. Han Qi was not used to Madame Tao's kindness at first, but he did not refuse her kindness. It didn't take long for Madame Tao to reveal her true nature. She hoped that Han Qi could take care of her current husband's legitimate son. Of course, this legitimate son was not Madame Tao's biological son. It was the precious egg that her husband's predecessor gave birth to due to dystocia and bleeding. In terms of age, he was half a year older than Han Qi and was even in the class next to Han Qi, a chubby and fierce-looking little fatty. Han Qi didn't like him and didn't want to agree, but Madame Tao's words implied that Han Qi was inferior to her. She should take care of the little fatty so that Madame Tao's position in the family could be stable. Han Qi's personality was soft while little fatty was arrogant. He was bullied to the point of tears. He told Madame Tao about his grievances, but Madame Tao told him to bear with it. This made Han Qi extremely sad. Because he loved to cry, his close friends of the same age called him Han Ernyang. Han Qi didn't like it but didn't object. He turned around and gave them a nickname. The little fatty didn't know where he heard this from, but he actually laughed and wanted to take off Han Chi's pants to see if he had roots. If he had roots, why would he be called Han Ernyang? Han Chi broke free with grievances and ran to the rockery in the garden to cry. Then Chiguan Dalong, who was worried, came to find him. Chiguan Chong was furious when he heard this. Did that beast really do that and say that? Han Chi cried again. His eyes were as red as a rabbit's. Just you wait. I'll beat that bastard until his parents don't recognize him. Chiguan Chong's temperament was completely different from his father's. He was like a firecracker, exploding at the slightest touch. Although he exploded, this kid was also cunning. He didn't go to settle the score alone. He went to several different classes of different grades and called more than 20 people to beat them up together. This matter became big. Not only were the school teachers alarmed, but the parents of several children also knew. So many people beating one person? Isn't it not good? Han Chi hid behind Chiguan Chong like a rabbit and asked this person who was more like an older brother than an older brother. What are you afraid of? Don't you know that the law doesn't punish the masses? Therefore, Chiguan Chong, who said, the law doesn't punish the masses, was whipped by his father with a rattan cane. The law doesn't punish the masses? You've grown up. Chiguan Rang held the cane and said, today, I'll let you know that the law doesn't punish the masses. The more than 20 children who participated in the fight were basically the children of high-ranking officials in the court. There were sons and daughters. She didn't know how Chiguan Chong did it. He actually knew these children. When he said that his brother was bullied, these children all ran over to help. When Chiguan Rang heard that the cause was his son, he gritted his teeth in anger. His son was indeed a source of trouble. He was born to cause trouble for him. What was even more surprising was that after the 20 children were severely punished, they didn't resent Chiguan Chong. Instead, they showed an attitude of, brother, I'll bear the hardships with you and enjoy the blessings together. One by one, they silently accepted the punishment and limped home by their parents to continue to be punished. Han Chi was no exception. After all, he was the source of this vicious fight. However, Han Yu was a gentle man and he especially doted on his youngest son. A gentle man wouldn't punish his son with violence. He had to understand clearly before deciding how to punish him. After listening to his youngest son's pitiful narration, Han Yu was silent. He and Madame Tao had been separated for many years, but Madame Tao was still influencing the family like a ghost. Father, Han Yu asked him, do you want a mother? Han Chi. After a while, Han Chi said in a low voice, yes, but having a stepmother meant having a stepfather. That's what they used to say. Han Yu said, I'll look around. If it's possible, I'll try to find a suitable one. He didn't have much hope for it. In this life, Han Yu was still the mascot who dissed the whole court. However, he was not only protected by Jiang Pingji, but also by Chiguan Rang, Wei Ci, and other important ministers. Most of the ministers in the Golden Scale Academy were also inextricably linked to him. Not to mention that Master Yuanjing had been teaching at the Golden Scale Academy for so many years. The new generation of students under his tutelage had also entered the official ranks one after another. As the third disciple of Master Yuanjing, Han Yu was, in a sense, the senior brother of the new generation. Han Yu had offended many people, but his background was strong enough. Even so, he was still not competitive in the marriage market. As a man in his 40s, he had 2 legitimate sons, 1 illegitimate son, and 1 illegitimate daughter. Except for Han Chi, the other 3 were all adults and were still practicing and serving as officials. If the second wife married into the family, she would basically be a housekeeper. Even if she had children, she wouldn't be able to compete with the first few. Those who were well matched in terms of social status didn't like Han Yu. They were old and had children. Han Yu was worried about those who were from a lower social status. Han Yu had seen too many women in the inner house who did crazy things to fight for the family property. Therefore, the promise he made to Han Chi was basically a verbal promise. Han Chi didn't care about it. Han Yu didn't care either. He greeted the official media and forgot about it. When Han Yu crawled out of the pile of files and took some time to let the servants shave his face, the official media came to the door. The servant was shaving Han Yu's beard when the official media came. Why is the official media here? Run and the others are outside. The marriage is not urgent. Qi is still young. The servant had a strange look on his face. Master, the official media is looking for you. Han Yu? His brain, which had been overloaded for half a year, finally dug out relevant memories from the depths of his memory. Do you still remember this? The servant couldn't help but cry and laugh. Han Yu was a rich man. He was probably the most difficult matchmaker the official media had ever been. He didn't dare to push an unsuitable candidate to the front of the official media. The servant said, Master, it's rare that you have a day off today. Why don't you send him away? Han Yu also wanted to say yes, but the official media had been looking for him for half a year. It wasn't good to send him away. Let me see him. The official media bowed to Han Yu. After getting permission, he stood up and handed over the card and the picture of the candidate. Which family? Han Yu was a little curious. He also had some requirements for the target. It couldn't be a young and unmarried girl. He was over 40 years old. Why would an old man want to harm people? It would be best if the girl was educated and a widow. It would be best if she had a few children with her husband's family. Having children would mean having ties. She would treat Han Qi as her own and Han Yu would also take care of her children. The relationship of exchanging benefits made him feel more at ease. Han Yu also knew how busy he was. He was young and had fantasies about love. It would be a sin for him to marry someone. It would be better to choose a partner to live with. The official media revealed the information of the girl with a flattering smile. Han Yu happened to open the picture and was so shocked that he almost tore it apart. What a joke! Han Yu threw the picture on the table like a scourge. He didn't even look at the basic information of the girl. He was too familiar with the girl in the picture. Miyu came to the capital to report on her work half a year ago. She was a strong and fierce woman. She was the inspector of Ning province. She came to report on her work this time with the intention of being promoted again. The official media had sent a picture of such a woman to him. What a joke! They had even greeted each other yesterday. The official media said, Your Excellency's portrait was also sent to them. They liked it very much. It wasn't a one-sided choice. Miyu chose Han Yu first and then the official media asked Han Yu for his opinion. Han Yu was speechless. He remembered that Miyu had a family. The official media said, They have been separated for more than a year. Han Yu vaguely remembered that the news of Miyu's separation from her family had spread to the capital and caused quite a commotion. It seemed that the husband of the girl was still crying in front of her house and wanted to remarry. However, her heart was as hard as iron. The official media continued, Your Excellencies are a match made in heaven. Han Yu waved his hand and signaled the official media to leave. A match made in heaven, my asterisk. Listening to the official media, Miyu knew that it wasn't just a matter of a day or two. Then what was the meaning of little Chao's greeting yesterday as if nothing had happened? After thinking about it, Han Yu decided to go and ask her personally. Miyu seemed to have expected it. I've been waiting for you. Han Yu was almost choked. Miyu handed a piece of paper to Han Yu. Your Excellency, please take a look at this before you say anything. Han Yu looked down and his face almost cracked. Your Excellency, please consider it. It's not a difficult request. Han Yu had a strange look on his face. Miyu said, They have served me for many years. After so many years, we have developed a sisterly relationship. It's a waste of time to stay there, so I bought all their contracts of slavery. They will live a carefree life as long as I am alive in the future. Han Yu was speechless. Other people got married with gold, silver, and jewelry. When Miyu got married, she got married with her ex-husband's concubines. Yes, you read it right. She got married with her ex-husband's concubines. After Miyu divorced her ex-husband, she took away all the concubines of her ex-husband who were willing to leave. She even married them into her new husband's family. Ridiculous. Miyu said, Of course I won't make things difficult for your Excellency. Their daily necessities, food, clothing, and other expenses are all paid for by me. They won't appear in front of your Excellency after marriage. They will only say that they are my dowry. They won't taint the reputation of your house. If the two of them got married, they could live together if they liked it. If they didn't, they could live separately. Miyu was busy, so was Hanyu. No one could blame the other. Hanyu thought it was ridiculous. But Miyu smiled. She looked at Hanyu with undisguised ambition. Your Excellency, don't you understand your own situation? You are extremely favored, but you are also extremely dangerous. I can help you and protect you. At the same time, I can borrow your power. This is supposed to be a mutually beneficial thing. Why don't you agree? I heard that the former madam of your house is not well behaved. If there is a proper mistress, she will think twice, right? Hanyu was speechless. After a while, Hanyu said, to be honest, according to the Ministry of Personnel, your promotion is a sure thing. Miyu said, but it's not enough. Not enough? Hanyu said, I can't help you with anything. He didn't think that Miyu was someone who needed to go through the back door. How long had it been since she became an official and became the inspector of Ningzhou? In just a few years, she had walked a path that others might not finish in a lifetime. Of course I don't need your help. His Majesty trusts and values you, Han Wenbin. This is what I value. Miyu said and added, as long as we are husband and wife in name, it will be enough. But whether it is in name or in reality, it depends on fate. Hanyu left with a gloomy face. At this time, a graceful woman walked out from behind the screen. The woman sat beside Miyu and massaged her shoulders. That Excellency doesn't look like he will agree. Miyu smiled and said, why not? The woman was one of her ex-husband's concubines. She was also willing to redeem herself and leave with Miyu. But look, Miyu said, just wait. In a few days, His Majesty will come forward to make peace. The woman was surprised. Why? Miyu said, he has made too many enemies. It seems that he has a strong background, but the wind in the court is always changing. Who knows if his classmates who were laughing with him a few days ago will become his enemy in a few days? How many people have been hurt by his reform of the law? Many people are thinking about him. The woman said, then His Majesty wants to make peace? Miyu said, of course, to protect this precious egg. As expected, Miyu would definitely rise to a high position. But she still felt that it was not enough. She really wanted to be at the top of the world. A small Ningzhou couldn't satisfy her ambition. The woman looked at Miyu and sighed. But you don't have to get married, Miyu said. Even if we get married, we can live our own lives. He is an excellent shield. So am I. She and Hanyu were not young people in their 20s. They knew what they wanted. Do you think I am wronged? In the eyes of ordinary people, marriage is a big event that will affect their whole life. But if I get married again, it will be my third marriage. When it came to getting married, it was a matter of familiarity the first time, familiarity the second, and familiarity the third. It doesn't matter whether we get married or not. What matters is how we live our lives. Miyu's effort was equal to her gain, so she didn't feel wronged. If the gain was greater than the effort, then it was a profit. The woman was not optimistic about it. A month later, an imperial edict was issued. She was dumbfounded. Hanyu's ex-wife, Mrs. Tao, and Miyu's ex-husband were also dumbfounded. All the civil and military officials in the court were also dumbfounded. Master Yuanjing went to visit his students at his old age. Hanyu was not worried as expected, nor was he happy to be a groom. Instead, he was very calm. Things are not like what you are worried about, Master. I get along well with that person. It was not a lie. They really got along well. After a conversation, they found that many of their interests overlapped. It was not love between a man and a woman, but it was not a problem for them to live together. They were more like-minded friends than husband and wife. The two of them had indeed been friends for nearly 30 years. Hanyu's only grudge was the group of concubines in Miyu's backyard. Are you raising concubines or daughters? On Miyu's 50th birthday, Hanyu gave her concubines 16 gifts. However, at the birthday party, he found that all the women in Miyu's room were strangers. They were all gentle and sweet to her. She was living a better life than the emperor. Did your majesty know? Mikan said, this old one likes to raise daughters. It's not like I've given you a single copper coin. Han Yu was speechless. Did he feed those 16 gifts to the dogs? Genius. 1 second to remember my address. Mobile version. Chapter 1854. The spring rain was so noisy that it was hard to fall asleep. Mi Ke tossed and turned in bed from the second half of the night until dawn. She was a light sleeper and had many nightmares, so she woke up after an hour. What time is it now? The maid on night duty answered, Madam, it's just past 7. It's only 7? Hearing the way the maidservant addressed her, Mi Ke suddenly remembered that she had spent the night in the Han Manor, so it could be considered as her home. The maid asked, Madam, do you want to get up now? Mi Ke answered, yes. Maidservants came in one after another, helping Mi Yu wash her face, tidying up her hair, and even giving her an exquisite massage to relieve her headache. Madam hasn't been sleeping well recently. Do you want a doctor to come and take a look? Mi Ke propped her elbows on the dressing table and pretended to sleep for a while to relax her tired mind. No need. It's the same problem every year. I'll be fine after a few days. Mi Ke was working in the capital now. She spent most of her time in her own residence and only a few at the Han residence. Although she didn't stay much, the courtyard was still well equipped. It was bustling with people and didn't look cold at all. The maid tied her hair into a loose bun so it wouldn't hurt her scalp. Her makeup was also much simpler than usual. She looked at the phoenix eyes in the mirror and asked in surprise, why is it so simple today? If she remembered correctly, this maid was an expert in all kinds of makeup that was popular in the capital. Mi Ke would sometimes complain about makeup that was too flashy. Even though she didn't look old and looked to be in her early 30s, her makeup was too thick. Today was a rare day. The maidservant said, yesterday, old master reminded me that Madam prefers a more simple and unadorned one these days. Mi Ke was taken aback for a moment, then smiled and said, as expected of the famous Han Wenbin, you are indeed meticulous in your actions. His success wasn't without reason. It could be seen from every little detail in his life. Every year, on this day, Mi Chu's mood would become very gloomy, especially on this day, because it was the death anniversary of her first husband. After dressing up, Mi Ke looked at the woman in the mirror who looked to be in her late 20s and felt a little better. Madam, San Langjun heard that you were here, so he came to pay his respects. Mi Ke said, let him come. When she arrived at the main hall of the main courtyard, the young man who looked like a ball of childishness was waiting for her. Your son pays his respects to mother. Mi Ke said, Vice? Is the academy's rest day today? Han Chi stood up and sat on the seat to Mi Chu's right, then said seriously, today, the academy will still have classes. Mi Ke frowned. Class? This kid is skipping class? That shouldn't be the case. Han Chi was a rather well-behaved child, so well-behaved that he didn't have his own opinions. How could an obedient child do such a disgraceful thing like skipping class? Wasn't he afraid of being beaten up by his father? Han Chi said, a few days ago, father applied for half a day of classes for me. He said it was to accompany mother. Mi Chu, all right. She had to admit that there was indeed something praiseworthy about a person who was able to make it through the chaos of the world to where he was now and rise up step by step. In that case, Chi will accompany mother to Xianxia Temple on the outskirts of the capital today. Xianxia Temple was originally a temple in Hejian County, but His Majesty later allocated funds to build one in the outskirts of the capital. It was said that the old monk in the temple had taught His Majesty. Even though His Majesty didn't believe in Buddhism and had tried to curb the development of Buddhism and was more inclined towards Taoism, it didn't affect the incense burning in Xianxia Temple. Mi Chu also donated some money to the temple and held a few water and land dharma meetings to pray for the dead. Nowadays, the world was peaceful, but there were always places where people had to be careful when they were outside. Han Chi brought enough guards and went all the way from the inner city to Xianxia Temple on the outskirts of the capital. He didn't run into any trouble. He was in trouble. As the only child that Han Yu was still raising, Han Chi was truly isolated and had no siblings to share the burden with him. When his parents wanted to teach him something, he could only bite the bullet and do it. For 4 hours, Mi Chu didn't stop asking questions. At first, Han Chi was able to answer fluently, but the more he asked, the more anxious he became. His young and tender face was flushed with embarrassment. It's so embarrassing, pi omega pi. Mi Chu laughed. You are still young. This level is already something to be proud of. Han Chi stammered, Mother, please comfort me. I understand. He realized that he was the only one in the family who didn't study well. Whether it was his brother Han Run or his brother and sister, their grades in the Golden Scale Academy were all in the top 3 among the dozens of people in their classes. Han Chi was different. He was always in the bottom 50. He didn't inherit anything from his father except for his face. Not to mention his father and now his mother. If it were someone else with strong self-esteem, they would have been anxious to change their temperament, but Han Chi was still slow. Han Yu didn't force him like other parents, or he was so busy with work that he didn't have the energy to be strict with his son. His son didn't become a playboy, which was the biggest contribution to the family. Mi Chu said, being good-looking is also an advantage. Han Chi. Mi Chu said, if you have a bit more knowledge, with that face of yours and your family background, you should be able to become a famous scholar. Han Chi was speechless. He couldn't tell if his mother was praising or insulting him. Today wasn't a big festival, but there were still many tourists in the temple and there were many carriages outside. Han Chi saw a familiar carriage in the parking lot and stopped in his tracks. Mi Chu looked in the direction and found the family emblem on the carriage familiar. Wasn't that the family emblem of Han Yu's ex-wife who remarried? Mother? Mi Chu was also aware of the resentment between Han Yu and his ex-wife. She frowned slightly, but her heart softened when she saw Han Chi's pitiful rabbit face. Let's go. Don't waste time. As soon as he entered the main hall of the Buddhist temple, he saw Han Yu's ex-wife leading a strange young lady. The 4 of them looked at each other. Mi Chu didn't even move her eyes and walked straight over. Han Chi braced himself and saluted Madame Tao. Madame Tao accepted it with a stiff face, but her eyes were fixed on Mi Chu's face and she clenched the handkerchief in her hand. She snorted and ignored Han Chi. She was about to lead the strange young lady away. Mi Chu reached out her hand and blocked her path. What are you doing? Madame Tao was so angry that her eyes were about to burst into flames. Things had changed with the passage of time. Now she valued other things more than what she used to hold on to. Without the power and status brought by Han Yu, without the protection and halo of the Tao family, she was just a weak and helpless woman. Now, Mi Chu jumped out and took everything she once didn't want. Mi Chu opened the heavy and dazzling golden fan in her hand, the pendant of which was made from the finest jade of the world. She held the fan and covered half of her pretty face. Chi bow to you. Madame Tao sneered, so what? He is my flesh and blood. He should bow to me. It's none of your business whether I accept it or not. She was Han Yu's first wife, and Mi Chu was just his 3rd wife. But, did she want to stop and bow to me? Unexpectedly, Mi Chu smiled and said, I am a 2nd-rank official in the imperial court. Can't a commoner bow to an official? Madame Tao? Han Chi, who was a little sad and wronged. Mi Chu said, Chi should bow to you, and you should bow to me. Madam, you come from a noble family and are well-educated and reasonable. How can you not know this? You don't have the title of honorary lady. Secondly, you don't have the title of honorary lady. Thirdly, your family was convicted by His Majesty as a traitor. If Chi ignored you, I wouldn't have recognized you. Since you've recognized Madam's identity, then the rules should be set. Madame Tao's face turned pale, as if it was covered with a layer of white ash. The young lady behind her was also scared and bowed to Mi Chu first. After a while, Madame Tao bowed to Mi Chu reluctantly and extremely humiliatingly. Get up. I am on leave today, so I can't show my authority. If the imperial censor finds out and reports it to His Majesty, it won't be good. Madame Tao gritted her teeth and her eyes were red. She pinched the young lady's wrist and dragged her away. Should she stay and be humiliated? Han Chi was dumbfounded. Mi Chu said, She is your birth mother. She shouldn't be treated like this. However, I also can't bear the slightest grievance. She had seen many old foxes in the officialdom. Which one of them didn't have a complicated mind? How could she not see through Madame Tao's thoughts? She was just an ignorant and sad woman. Did she really think that the title of Li's first wife could suppress her? Not to mention actual actions, she couldn't even think about it. In the past, Mi Chu wouldn't do this, but today was different. Today was the anniversary of her late husband's death. She didn't want him to see her being wronged. Han Chi lowered his head and said nothing. Mi Chu offered incense and burned some Buddhist scriptures in the side hall. 2 hours passed in a flash. Before leaving the temple, Mi Chu asked the Buddhist monk who cleaned the main hall. Only then did she know that the young lady beside Madame Tao was a concubine she arranged for her remarried husband. In order to win over her husband's heart and to stabilize her position as the first branch, she desperately hoped that the concubine she carefully selected could have a child as soon as possible. Today, she offered incense to pray for a child. The corners of Mi Yu's mouth twitched, and she couldn't help but retort, "I can understand praying for good health, but what's wrong with going to a monastery to pray for children?" Han Chi was puzzled. "Why?" Mi Yu said, "Don't you think it's ridiculous for a monk to say that the world is empty and seek a child from a monk?" Han Chi, if the Buddha heard this, he would cry. Mi Ku was very busy, but she was still better off than Han Yu. She had 3 days off every month. Out of respect for Han Yu, Mi Kan would occasionally ask about Han Chi's studies and care about his life in the academy. It was Han Chi's first time coming into contact with a woman like Mi Chu, and he quickly felt closer to her than his birth mother, Madame Tao. Han Chi was sent back to the Han estate by the housekeeper. The woman who was massaging Mi Yu's shoulders said, "Third Lang Jun is not bad. He has a pure and kind nature." "What are you trying to say?" The woman said with a smile, "There's no harm in passing him over and putting him under your name. I'm sure the old master will agree." Mi Ku played with the golden fan and said with a smile, "If we do that, Madame Tao will probably vomit blood from anger." The woman said gently, "Everyone has their own fate. This is her fate." To be able to forcefully turn a situation like this into the current situation was also a skill. She prided herself on being smart, but she never saw the truth in her life. Her fate had always been in the hands of others. It wasn't others who wanted to control her fate, but she took the initiative to give it to others. All honor and disgrace were tied to her family, her husband, and her son. Her family was destroyed, her husband was divorced, and her son was estranged. She lost everything, but she still didn't wake up and continued to stubbornly step into the same pit. She wouldn't understand now, and she wouldn't understand why her life was like this in the future. Mi Ku looked at the painting and inscription on the golden fan and said indifferently, "I only hope that there will be fewer women like her in the world." The woman said, "With Madame as a role model, why would those women not be moved?" Mi Ku sneered, "You don't understand. There are always more people who sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor than those who do it themselves. So what if there was a role model? The current emperor was still a woman. As long as getting married and having children is still a way out for women. Women like Madame Tao will still be endless." Mi Ku sneered, "They will only say, 'This is a woman with a good life. It's a pity that she has been married 3 times, no matter how high the position and generous the salary is, it's not as good as them.' Then they will turn around and teach their daughters to work hard to marry better men, and teach their sons to study hard and practice martial arts, so that they won't be inferior to women. No one is a fool. Of course, they know that it's much easier to marry a man in a high position than to become a woman in a high position." The woman didn't understand. Many years later, Han Yu asked her if she wanted to be buried with her late husband. She was dying of old age. Mi Ku smiled, "It's good to be a neighbor with an old man like you. Why bother the dead?" Han Yu sat beside the bed and asked her, "Are you relieved now? Things that I couldn't think through at 17 should be solved at 71. How can my state of mind be the same as now?" Her young man lived in her heart for nearly 50 years. She didn't have the passionate feelings and obsession of the past. Instead, she felt that he was an old friend who had left for a long time. She said, "Hello, and take care." She looked at the sunlight outside the window. Vaguely, he could hear a faint chuckle in his ears. Mika smiled. An old friend finally returned. Please remember the domain name of this book. Jiutian Shenhuang Mobile Version. Chapter 1855. Feng Zhen was nicknamed Prodigal Feng. His life philosophy was, joy should be enjoyed in time, how could it be delayed? This was a free and unruly wastrel who was particular about carpe diem. Others laughed at him for being deviant and not knowing what etiquette was. He laughed at others for working hard all their lives and never having a day of true joy. Such a prodigal naturally couldn't be expected to live a 9-to-5 life. It was already good enough that he wasn't caught skipping work every day. However, the situation wasn't right in the past 2 days. Had Prodigal Feng been possessed by someone or something? He actually didn't leave early or arrive late. No, not only did he not leave early or arrive late, but he also arrived early and left late. His brows were full of nervousness and alertness, and his nerves were stretched taut. Could it be that the situation at the front line is tense? Even Prodigal Feng, who had always been unrestrained and calm, was so serious. Was it because the situation at the front line wasn't right? When Feng Zhen wasn't paying attention, such rumors quietly spread, causing many fence-sitters to panic. Finally, it reached the ears of the Lord, Jiang Pengji. She frowned. As the Lord, she was the clearest about the situation at the front line. The enemy couldn't withstand a single blow. The situation wasn't tense, and the provisions and logistics were in place. No matter how she looked at it, this battle was a sleeping victory. What was Feng Zhen up to all of a sudden, making everyone so restless? Seeing that the rumors were getting more and more exaggerated, Jiang Pingji couldn't help but grab Feng Zhen and ask him about it. Why haven't you been to New Lu recently to drink and watch dances? The lady boss of the tavern you frequent is still thinking about your money pouch. Feng Zhen? The two of them stared at each other. Feng Zhen suddenly revealed a little grievance that made one's heart ache. This time, it was Jiang Pingji's turn to be confused. She reflected on herself and didn't find any problems with her words. Did it agitate Feng Zhen? The person who went to New Lu all day to drink and watch dances was indeed Feng Zhen. The lady boss of the tavern was also concerned about his money pouch. He used to be radiant when he talked about these things. Why did he look as if he had offended an innocent woman? My lord, I'm afraid I won't be able to go again, Feng Zhen muttered. Please don't urge me to go again. As Feng Zhen's gang of scoundrels, it was perfectly normal for them to go to the women's den to drink and watch a dance together. However, without the tools to commit the crime, Jiang Pengji wouldn't stay there overnight. Ever since they got married, Feng Zhen's personality had changed. He only drank and didn't cross the line. For the two of them, going to New Lu to drink was not so much because they were greedy for the wine there, but because they were greedy for the colors there. Because of this, Feng Zhen was secretly scolded by many people. They said that he was a wastrel who had led the lord astray. Feng Zhen felt that he had been wronged. His lord was just an experienced driver who was familiar with the roads. Why would she need him to take her driving test? Jiang Pengji said, "You've changed? Are you preparing to turn over a new leaf?" Feng Zhen sighed. My wife is pregnant. The doctor said that her pulse is not very stable. Jiang Pengji understood. So that was why. If that was the reason, she could understand Feng Zhen's choice. It was fine if he wasn't serious normally, but he should pay attention to his wife's pregnancy. This was something he should do as a man. However, that's not right. If your wife is pregnant, then why have you been leaving early and returning late? I won't increase your salary even if you work a few more hours a day. It's better to finish what you're doing early and go home to accompany your wife. Jiang Pingji criticized Feng Zhen. Do you know how much of a joke you've made with your recent series of abnormal actions? Everyone thought that Feng Longzi was acting out of character because the front line was in a tight spot. There were so many people spreading rumors that even I almost believed them. When I investigated the source, it was actually you. Feng Zhen? How could she blame him for this? She was pushing the blame too far. Feng Zhen sighed. It's precisely because my wife is pregnant that I don't dare to go back. After thinking about it, I can only help my lord relieve her of her burdens, Jiang Pingji raised her hand to stop Feng Zhen from bewitching her. Out of 10 words that came out of Feng Longzi's mouth, 8 needed to be carefully considered to be true or false. The remaining 2 were false. Are you willing to be honest? Feng Zhen choked for a moment and said with grievance, "It's true that my wife is pregnant, that I don't dare to return to the manor." Jiang Pingji didn't quite understand. Feng Zhen was old, his knees were weak, and his body wasn't very healthy. His wife was pregnant after much difficulty, so he should be ecstatic. This was so abnormal. Could it be that the child belonged to old Wang next door? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and recall which family lived next door to Feng Zhen's. Feng Zhen saw the slight change in her expression and knew that his lord was mistaken. He had to explain in a low voice, "Before this, I had a son named Feng Q's, the son that my first wife gave birth to at the cost of her life. Or has been intelligent and beautiful since he was young. His temperament is very similar to his mother's." Feng Zhen had a son before? Jiang Pingji was very surprised because she didn't know about this before. Listening to Feng Zhen's tone, this child should have died young. It was indeed young, and the cause of death was related to Feng Zhen. That year, Feng Zhen was addicted to Hanshi powder. The young Feng Yi didn't know the truth and happened to see Feng Zhen after taking Hanshi powder. He thought that something had happened to him and hurriedly went to find the housekeeper to save Feng Zhen, who knew that in early spring, the rain would be plentiful and the moss would be lush. Little Feng Yi accidentally slipped off the stone steps and fell into the icy cold pond water. Although he was saved, he caught a serious cold that night and died of high fever. Feng Zhen always thought that he was the cause of his son's death and felt regret for many years. Sometimes, he would dream about this intelligent son in the middle of the night and couldn't help but cry when he woke up. He gave up on the idea of having another child, and he was born weak and sickly, so he couldn't have one even if he wanted to. A while ago, his wife, Wan Xiu, shyly and timidly told him that she was pregnant. Feng Zhen felt his whole body go blank, as if a cold chill spread from the soles of his feet to his head. On the surface, he was ecstatic, but in his heart, there was an uncontrollable panic and fear. Jiang Pingji was speechless. "Are you afraid that you'll be cuckolded?" As soon as she said this, the feelings that Feng Zhen had been brewing were instantly broken. "What are you saying, my lord? My wife and I have a deep relationship. Why would I suspect this?" The sickly man wasn't someone who was born to be impotent. The low probability of pregnancy didn't mean that there was no possibility of winning. The welfare lottery only had 1 in 100 million. The probability was so low, but there was still the birth of the chosen one every season. Feng Zhen had a son, Feng Yi, so naturally, he wouldn't think that he couldn't have a child. So what if his wife was pregnant? Must it be because of old Wang next door? If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't beat his lord, Jiang Pingji, Feng Zhen would have fallen out with her on the spot. "Goodbye, our friendship is over." "Then why did you say that you were panicking and afraid? You said it yourself, I didn't force you to say it." Feng Zhen was speechless. Actually, that wasn't what Feng Zhen wanted to express. "Your subject is indeed panicking and afraid. If this child can't be kept and dies." He had always thought that he wasn't fated to have children, so his first child, who was so good, was also killed by him. With such a thought, Feng Zhen naturally felt an indescribable fear of having a second child. He wasn't afraid of the child itself, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to keep this child. He didn't dare to go back and face his wife for a long time, so he could only use work as an excuse to avoid her and give himself time and space to think things through. However, before he could understand this matter, his lord came first, and he even made a fool of himself. Jiang Pingji also understood what Feng Zhen was conflicted about. She said, "I come from a humble background, so I can't speak of any great principles, but there is one thing I understand. Since the child has set his sights on you and wants you to be his father after reincarnation, it means that he is satisfied with you. How can you let the child down?" Feng Zhen couldn't help but complain, "My lord, what you said is quite touching." Jiang Pingji said coldly, "I can say something even more touching. Do you want to hear it?" Feng Zhen was speechless. Jiang Pingji said, "I heard that pregnant women are sensitive and think a lot. You leave early and come back late all day. Aren't you afraid that your wife will think too much? Maybe she thinks that you haven't changed, and that you took advantage of her inconvenience during her pregnancy to be seduced by a little demon outside? If the mother isn't good, the child will be even worse. Feng Zhen was speechless. He had forgotten about this terrible thing. That day, Jiang Pingji heard that Feng Zhen had left early again, an entire 2 hours early. This Feng Longzi is really getting more and more indecent. What if he delays the Lord's business? Jiang Pingji glanced at the snitch. What else can we do? Deduct his salary. Deduct so much that this fellow can't even afford milk powder and diapers. / book / / Chapter 1856. On the road on the outskirts of the capital. The blue-robed young man looked at the lofty wall that was faintly visible on the horizon. His eyes couldn't help but light up a little. Feng Langjun, it's windy outside. Why don't you rest in the carriage? The curtain of the carriage was lifted, revealing a small and delicate face. There were a few freckles on her cheeks, but she looked even more cute and lively. The girl's invitation made the young man in blue fall into a trance, but it quickly turned into awkwardness. He rejected her, and couldn't help but steer his horse away from her. Seeing this, the girl snorted and pouted. You look like a smart person. Why are you so insensible? The young man in blue had good eyes and ears. The sound of the carriage wheels wasn't loud, so he didn't miss the girl's complaint. His expression became even more awkward. At this time, the young man riding with them came forward and joked in a low voice, Brother Rongli, you're so boring. The lady is interested in you. But you, the goddess dreams, the king has no heart. The lady is the daughter of a rich merchant in Sun Prefecture. Her father is very rich and her business seems to be quite big. If you marry her, you can spend the rest of your life lying on a mountain of gold and silver. The young man in blue glared at him, but his eyes were so good that he couldn't feel any disgust when he glared at him. If you like it, go ahead. Don't drag me into it. His companion laughed. If I had a face like Brother Rongli's and talent, I would naturally try my luck and see if I could marry into her family and become her son-in-law. Unfortunately, the body that my parents gave me has already been decided. She doesn't like your blockhead. The young man in blue sighed helplessly. Seeing this, he could probably guess who he was. It was Feng Rongli, the eldest son of Feng Zhen, who had outstanding achievements in local politics and was transferred back to the capital. But he was unlucky. He accidentally got separated from his servant and didn't bring much money with him. Fortunately, he met the young man next to him, a Jianghu ranger who said he wanted to go to the ends of the world with his sword and punish evildoers, so he hitched a ride with him. This ranger companion was a warm-hearted person. His only flaw was his fondness for women. He would never stop fooling around. However, what made Feng Yi and her companions despair was that all the flowers and plants that were attracted had their eyes on Feng Yi. No matter how Feng Yi said he was engaged and that he had a fiancée at home, it couldn't stop his luck with women. The exuberant peach blossoms made Feng Yi tremble. His companion laughed at him for being timid. How could a man like a man be scared by a woman who came to him voluntarily? Feng Yi and Feng Yi's Feng Yi. How could he tell his friends that half a year ago his fiancée had sent him a letter from home, along with a romance book with a seemingly strange plot? Oh, the author was Layman Zeike, who had been growing more and more girlish these years. The book had a total of more than 30,000 words, and in a concise manner, it told the story of a high-ranking female official who took 7 tests to meet her fiancé, and finally got married and entered the bridal chamber. In layman's terms, this was the woman setting a trap for the man, one trick after another. Feng Yi couldn't help but break into a cold sweat for the male protagonist. What worried him the most was that there was a small note in the letter. Changsheng asked him if he wanted to do the same. Feng Yi was worried since he was on his way. He was afraid that he would meet Miss Bao, the prostitute who sold herself to bury her father, the poor servant girl who was abused by her master. Of course, Feng Yi had not met any of these tricks since he had been on the road. But it didn't mean he was safe. Especially when the ranger who was with him was a womanizer. Feng Yi was always nervous. "You're such a boring man." Feng Yi frowned and said, "A gentleman should be clean." His companion smiled and said, "Fine, you're a gentleman. I just want to be a playboy." Feng Yi frowned again, but he didn't say anything. When they were about to enter the city, Feng Yi declined the goodwill of the rich merchant and his daughter. His heart wanted to fly to the mansion. "You really refused?" His companion said, "I can see that the father and daughter really appreciate you." According to the rich merchant, Feng Yi promised to marry his daughter and he prepared a dowry of tens of thousands of coins for his daughter. Feng Yi was a scholar. He talked well and had an elegant temperament, but he dressed plainly. He didn't come from a good family. If he married this rich merchant's daughter, he would at least have financial support for his studies and career. Feng Yi said helplessly, "I already have a fiancé." His companion was speechless. He really had a fiancé? He thought that Feng Yi was just finding an excuse to fool the others. Today was Feng Yi's first time in the capital. He could only follow the address given by his family. After asking many people, he finally found the location of the Feng mansion. His companion asked, "Is your relative working for a rich family?" When he found Feng Yi, the latter looked calm, but he couldn't hide his embarrassment. When he introduced himself, he only said that his relative was in the capital. He was going to rely on his relative. He thought that Feng Yi's relative was running a small business in the capital. He didn't expect that he was serving a rich family. While they were talking, Feng Yi saw the plaque of the mansion. Leading the horse forward, his companion asked, "We'll be beaten if we run directly to their gate, right?" How could the main gate of a high official's mansion be approached so easily? Feng Yi said, "It's okay. It's my home." His companion was speechless. Coincidentally, a carriage stopped in front of the Feng mansion. The curtain was lifted, and a woman in a blue dress with her hair in a bun came out. The servant girl held an umbrella for her. The servants all lowered their heads and didn't dare to look at her face. After a few years, Feng Yi recognized the woman at a glance. "Xianxia?" The woman stopped walking up the stairs and turned her head. Brother Wang Lin?" She seemed to want to run over, but as soon as she took a step, she restrained herself. But her eyes were shining with excitement. Feng Yi also walked forward quickly. He couldn't help but want to hug her, but he suppressed the impulse in the end. "Xianxia, I'm back." The two looked at each other for a long time until a young cough broke the ambiguity under the calm surface. Feng Yi lowered her head and saw a chubby boy with a pink face standing by Changxing's feet. "Changxing, is this your future brother-in-law?" "Changxing?" Feng Yi thought that this little boy was Feng Jin's youngest son, and his age was suitable. But Changxing said, "Not little brother, it's..." Before she could finish, the little fat boy stretched out his fat paw to Feng Yi and called out softly, "Big brother." "Feng Yi?" Changxing said helplessly, "This is Feng Yu, your second brother." As a punishment for mistaking her brother, Feng Yi could only smile bitterly and carry her heavy brother away. At this time, her companion realized that Feng Yi was the son of a high-ranking official. If he didn't do well outside, he could only come home to inherit his father's family business. He was a standard second-generation official. With Feng Yi's return, the family's worries were finally lifted. After the welcoming banquet, Feng Zhen looked at his eldest son, who had finally grown up. His eyes were shining. Back in the room, he took out an almanac from under his pillow and slowly flipped through it. "What are you looking for?" Wan Xiao finished checking the account book and found that her husband was still looking at the almanac. Feng Zhen said, "Looking at the auspicious date, the time should be set. Tomorrow, go and discuss with Feng Huayu. The two families should settle the marriage as soon as possible. If this drags on, Changxing will have to take up a post outside. When will the two youngsters be able to get married?" "Oh, I see you're anxious." Wan Xiao she felt that Feng Zhen was getting more and more muddle-headed as he got older. Didn't Her Majesty say that the two children will be betrothed? The auspicious date is naturally decided by the palace. Why are you getting involved? There was a clatter. The almanac in Feng Zhen's hands fell onto his legs. He looked pitiful. Wan Xiao rolled her eyes and said, "Which wedding isn't prepared a year and a half in advance?" If I let you do it, I would have offended the in-laws long ago. Feng Zhen, Wan Xiu, took out a booklet from somewhere and threw it to Feng Zhen. She had already sent people to prepare the important items and valuable items in advance. Other than holding a booklet and picking a useless auspicious date, what else could Feng Zhen do? He was unreliable when he was young and still didn't know how to organize his son's wedding. Feng Yi could grow up to this point without becoming crooked thanks to the protection of his late wife in the underworld. Her Majesty had secured the betrothal. His wife, Wan Xiu, had prepared the betrothal gifts. His son was a handsome groom. He looked dashing in formal attire. His son had kidnapped a bride since he was young. She was a noblewoman with the highest status in his generation, aside from the two princes. Feng Zhen had no place to interfere at the wedding banquet. Time passed quickly. The only thing Feng Zhen could do was drink a few more cups of wine. He was so moved that his eyes were brimming with tears. As the one marrying off his daughter, Feng Jin looked at Feng Zhen's sobbing face. He wasn't even that sad about his daughter marrying off. Why was Feng Zhen crying first? If not for his wife, Wei Jingxian, stopping him, Feng Jin would have argued with Feng Zhen. What was he crying about? Was he dissatisfied with his daughter? Wan Xiu felt embarrassed and said in a low voice, "What are you crying about? You've made a fool of yourself in front of the in-laws and the officials." Feng Zhen said, "Whenever I think about Rong Li getting married, I feel terrible and suffocated." Wan Xiu, "No, I'm saying that Rong Li finally has a family. As his father, I'm happy and moved. Back then, he was just a small ball." Feng Zhen immediately changed his words. He made a pitiful gesture with his hands and said, "When the midwife carried Rong Li to me, he cried even more weakly than a kitten. At that time, I thought we couldn't keep the child. In the blink of an eye, more than 20 years have passed and Rong Li is already married. Who knows, he might even become a father next year. Thinking about this, I have mixed feelings and can't help but want to cry." Feng Zhen had a good tolerance for alcohol. Usually, he wouldn't get drunk after 1,000 cups. He wouldn't even blush after drinking 1 or 2 jars of wine. But today, for some reason, he couldn't help but feel his eyes ache after only 2 cups of wine. It was his son getting married, but he felt like he was marrying off his daughter. That feeling of regret and satisfaction filled his heart. Thinking about his youngest son coming back after more than 10 years, Feng Zhen felt even sadder. He really needed to suck on his chubby son to catch his breath. Where did Feng Yu go? Come, let him suck on some wine. Comfort his hurt father's heart. Feng Yu rejected the offer. How could his unruly father compare to Prince Yan? Does this count as satisfaction? Listening to the sounds of the wedding banquet behind her, Jiang Pingji, who was in disguise, couldn't help but sigh. Wei Ci thought about Feng Zhen's loss of composure and laughed. Yes, satisfaction. When a person is happy, the moon is round. Please remember the domain name of this book, Jiutian Shenhuang Mobile Version. Chapter 1857. Didn't they say that this animal is very fierce? The young man in brocade clothes used the stick in his hand to poke the dark wild man who was locked up in the iron prison. It was said that the wild man in the iron prison was a child raised by a wolf pack. For some reason, he was separated from the wolf pack and was caught by a playboy who went out to hunt. They had heard of wolf children, but they had never seen a living one. He looked like a human, and there was nothing special about him. The servant standing next to the young man said in a trembling voice, "He was fed medicine, and now he has no strength left in his body. He was very fierce before, and even bit someone's arm off. That ruthlessness made people shiver. Lang Jun, be careful. Don't let this animal hit you." The young man didn't know how this wolf child grew. He looked like he was about 10 years old, but he was as tall as an adult man. He was tall and strong, and his muscles were tight and full of explosive power. His 2 long legs had amazing jumping power, and he ran very fast. If it weren't for the large number of people in the hunting team, and the little animal hadn't eaten for a few days, it would have run away. The young man, who was called Lang Jun by the servant, sneered and deliberately poked the wolf child's face with the stick in his hand. Humph, he's half dead. Do you think I'm afraid of him? The servant flattered. Langjin, you're right. But this animal hasn't washed for many days, and his excretion is also like an animal. I haven't trained him well. If he's now, I'm afraid I'll dirty your eyes. I'll send him to you after he's washed and trained. The young man threw the stick away and said, Remember to be quick. We're counting on him to turn the tables in the fight. The servant hurriedly nodded and bowed, as if giving a military order. The young man was not in the mood to listen to the servant's flattery. He waved his hand and signaled his guards to leave with him. He didn't see that when he turned around, a pair of dark and wild eyes stared at his face, full of bloodthirst. The young man didn't notice, but the servant did. When the young man left, the servant clenched his fist and threatened the weak wolf child. What are you staring at? Be careful or I'll dig out your eyeballs. The wolf kid was raised by the wolves. Since he was born, he had never trimmed his hair. The servants thought it was too troublesome to do so, so they took a pair of scissors and cut off the dirty, smelly, and stone-like hair. Then, they pressed the wolf kid into the cold pool water to bathe him. Every time the wolf kid choked on the water in the pond, he would let out a sorrowful and panicked cry. The servants who were watching the scene would roar with laughter, as if the scene in front of them was very amusing. Half a month later, the wolf child was pushed into the beast fighting gambling house as a secret weapon. To put it bluntly, the beast fighting gambling game was just an entertainment for some playboys. They would starve their pets for 2 days before throwing them into the arena for them to fight to the death. The pets that participated in the death match were usually heinous prisoners on death row. The winner would live, and the loser would die without a complete corpse. In order to add to the fun, they would usually set up a prize. The winner would get the prize, and some playboys would take pleasure in this. They would groom death row prisoners to fight and win the prize, which would give them face among their peers. Of course, fights between humans weren't fun either. Sometimes, savage beasts would be thrown in to increase the number of variables. The wolf child was the secret weapon of the young man. In less than a year, the wolf child helped the young man win countless battles. As a price, he was covered with terrible injuries, some of which were so deep that his bones could be seen. Every time he left the arena, he would be drenched in blood. Some people would even laugh and applaud when they saw him bite off his opponent's throat. However, no matter how powerful the wolf child was, he was not invincible. Indeed, he had the fighting instinct of a wolf and a body that was stronger than many adults. But after all, he didn't know how to fight. When he met a capable opponent, he would only lose. When he lay in a pool of blood, dying, his life seemed to be rapidly draining from his body. In a daze, his body was picked up from the ground, and the person seemed to be saying something. What a poor child. When the wolf child learned the human language, he learned that the person who saved him was called Fu Yang, a person who was taller, stronger, and more powerful than him. Every day, he was forced to learn the human language, learn the human handwriting, and practice martial arts at the same time. How could the wolf child be restrained? Naturally, he refused to be disciplined. As a result, he was taught a lesson. What, Fu Yang? Call me daddy. Fu Yang held a wooden stick in his hand and pinned the wolf child. His hands were held behind his back by the wooden stick, and he couldn't use any strength. The wolf child subconsciously growled like a beast, and the back of his head was hit hard. Speak human language. The wolf child, brute force and no brain. I can beat 5 of you with one hand. Fu Yang sneered. The wolf child was forced to kneel on the ground. He twisted and struggled for a long time, but still couldn't break free. He was so anxious that his head was full of sweat. Beg for mercy. Learn to beg for mercy, and I will let you go. The wolf child's eyes were burning with anger, and he said in an unpracticed official language, Don't even think about it. Okay, you have a backbone. Then let's be like this. When you calm down and learn to think with your brain instead of relying on brute force with your limbs, we can have a good talk. Fu Yang didn't loosen his grip and said with a smile, Let's see who gives in first. The two were in a stalemate from noon until the moon was high in the sky. The wolf child knelt until his knees were bruised. Fu Yang felt that the stimulation wasn't enough, so he asked his beloved concubine to feed him. The wolf child could only kneel and smell the food, but he couldn't eat it. Kid, do you see that? Fu Yang's mouth was full of oil, replenishing his lost strength. The wolf child was so tired that his lips were cracked, and his dark eyes were bloodshot. The wolf child bared his teeth at Fu Yang and stretched his neck to bite him, but his teeth were almost broken by Fu Yang's huge fist. You have to learn to be flexible, kid. Pure brute force will only make you die without even knowing how you died. Fu Yang grabbed a pair of chopsticks with his free hand, picked up a piece of meat, and put it next to the wolf child's mouth. I know you can understand human language. If you understand, then eat. If you don't, then continue to starve. After a while, Fu Yang heard the wolf child spit out a mouthful of bloody saliva, threatening him fiercely. I will kill you sooner or later. Yo, you've learned to talk tough? You've improved a lot, but you're still a little green. Fu Yang sneered. In this world, there are many people who want to kill me. The Meng family is not even on the list. Who do you think you are? When I die of old age, you probably won't have the chance. Fu Yang took pity on the wolf child and accepted him as his godson. He even gave him a name. In the future, you will be called Wang, Fu Wang. The wolf child thought that Wang meant expectation. Many years later, he learned that the name Fu Yang gave him was derived from, I hope that he will come back. Fu Yang's way of education was quite simple and rough, which was just right to restrain wild and unruly people like Fu Wang. Why didn't he learn calligraphy and the art of war? Beat him until he was willing to learn. Why didn't he learn the elegant language? Beat him until he could speak fluently. Why didn't he call him father? Beat him until he could call him father sweetly. If you don't have the power to resist, you have to learn to be flexible. This is called strategic hibernation. It's not a disgrace to conserve energy and endure hardships. Fu Yang stroked his adopted son's head. Every time he beat his adopted son, he would instill such thoughts in him. If Fu Wang admitted defeat soon, he would be beaten again. You're a wolf, not a dog. Why are you wagging your tail? You can't lose the courage in your bones. You're embarrassing me. Fu Wang, I'm afraid it's going to be difficult. Under such an education model, it was impossible for Fu Wang not to be crooked. I count on my fingers. You're about 21 or 22 this year, right? Fu Wang rolled his eyes. How did he know how old he was? Come, son, let your Uncle Da take you to a good place. You're an adult, you should learn some things. Uncle Da was the death row prisoner who had beaten Fu Wang to death. At that time, Fu Yang had saved Fu Wang by chance to save his old comrade who had become a death row prisoner. Fu Yang adopted Fu Wang and the latter became his only son. Uncle Da naturally became Fu Wang's martial arts master and one of his elders. Learn what? Fu Wang was traumatized by it. Fu Yang smiled slyly. You'll know when you get there. It's a good thing. In the end, Fu Wang was still dragged to the women's room and spent the night in a daze. Fu Wang was born to do this. At the age of 27 or 28, he became the most famous general under Fu Jing's command. Fu Yang was the spy that the royal family of Dongqing had placed in Sangzhou to monitor the Mengs. The conflict between him and the Mengs had escalated. During that time, Fu Wang clearly felt that the atmosphere in the military camp had become strange. Fu Yang, the old man, also became haggard and thin at a speed visible to the naked eye. You're dying? Fu Wang happened to hear the doctor's words. He grabbed the doctor like a chicken and confronted him in front of Fu Yang's sickbed. Fu Yang smiled weakly. I'm so old. I'm not allowed to die of old age. Fu Wang pursed his lips tightly and said nothing. Fu Yang was only 45 years old. He had always been strong and there was still a long way to go before he died of old age. A while ago, when the father and son were fighting, Fu Wang was suppressed by Fu Yang for a while with his rich experience. If Fu Wang didn't have the advantage of physical strength, he probably wouldn't have had the upper hand. How did he fall ill so easily? After Fu Yang finished speaking, his face suddenly darkened. If I die, remember not to mistreat your uncles. Otherwise, I'll crawl back to the netherworld and strangle you to death. Fu Wang's heart was filled with indescribable annoyance. Someone set you up? The old bastards of the Mengs? Calm down. Fu Yang reprimanded with a displeased expression. What's with your reaction? Have your years of teaching been eaten by dogs? Fu Wang was so angry that he flung his sleeves and left. When he saw Fu Yang again, the latter was already in a dying state. Listen, Fu Yang used his last breath to say, it's not the Mengs. Don't look for the truth. In the middle of the night, Fu Yang passed away. Fu Wang was so angry that he smashed all the weapon racks in the drill ground. On the 7th day after Fu Yang's death, the Mengs, who had been at odds with Fu Yang for many years, sent someone to invite Fu Wang to be their henchman with a smile. Henchman? Do you think you're qualified? The Meng's envoy didn't mind. After all, Fu Wang's temper was well known in Sangzhou. Young general, don't you want to know how General Fu died? Fu Wang clenched his fists. He almost couldn't restrain himself from lifting the envoy and interrogating him. You, the Meng's envoy said, young general, only our family head can protect old General Fu's life's work. Please think about it carefully. A thought flashed through Fu Wang's mind as he thought of a possibility. The royal family? But how could it be possible? Fu Yang, this old man, was loyal and devoted to the imperial family. If Fu Wang had the slightest disrespect, he would have been beaten into a pig's head. How could the royal family deal with old Fu? The Meng's envoy smiled meaningfully, but Fu Wang's heart sank. Is the emperor suspecting my adoptive father? The Meng's envoy said, being with the emperor is like being with a tiger. The emperor's heart is unpredictable. This indirectly confirmed Fu Wang's speculation. Not long after, Fu Wang took the soldiers and confidants left by Fu Yang to join the Mengs, but they didn't listen to orders. In order to win him over, the Mengs used a lot of money, beauties, luxurious cars. The people of Sangzhou only said that Fu Wang was an ingrate who turned to the enemy who killed Fu Yang after his adoptive father's death. Some of Fu Yang's old subordinates didn't understand. But Fu Wang did things his own way. The world was in chaos, and the Mengs took advantage of the situation to recruit soldiers and buy horses. The Mengs expanded, but they ignored Fu Wang, who was hiding in the dark. This guy turned the tables and took over the Mengs. He was then recruited by Prince Changshu, who was the most powerful at that time, and became the most valiant general. Prince Changshu knew that Fu Wang was a beauty, so he tried his best to find a woman for his beloved general. Fu Wang had a bad temper, and sometimes he would deliberately offend people. For example, he once said at a banquet that he liked Prince Changshu's beloved concubine. That beloved concubine was extremely beautiful, and it was said that her appearance was similar to Wang Huiyun, one of the two beauties of the Wangs. Prince Changshu used to be this talented woman's admirer, but unfortunately, the goddess married Xie Qian, a boorish man. Because of this past, Prince Changshu doted on this beloved concubine, even though she was born in a brothel. Hearing Fu Wang asking for her, Prince Changshu hesitated. Was his beloved general more important or his beloved concubine? Needless to say, his beloved general was more important. He felt uncomfortable, but he still generously pushed his beloved concubine, who was pouring wine for him, to Fu Wang's side. Being pushed by him, the wine pot in his hand fell to the ground, and the wine spilled all over the floor. The woman's expression changed slightly, but she still bowed meekly and came to Fu Wang's side to serve him. After the banquet ended, Fu Wang sat in the carriage with his eyes closed. His legs stretched out and occupied almost the entire space in the carriage. The woman could only shrink in a corner and lower her head. After a long time, Fu Wang loosened his collar and let go of the smell of alcohol. It doesn't feel good to be sent here and there, does it? The woman said in a low voice, this is my life, there's no such thing as feeling good or uncomfortable. Fu Wang sneered, you're very beautiful. If you serve me well, I won't give you away. The woman lowered her head. The carriage was dark, so he couldn't see her expression clearly. I'll listen to you, General. When that pair of soft hands touched his chest, Fu Wang smiled and pulled the woman into his arms. Prince Changshu also had a short life. When he was about to die, Fu Wang brought his men to seek refuge with Su Fei. Su Fei was forced to his death by Su Bei, and Fu Wang sought refuge with Su Bei. At the same time, he formed a grudge with Su Bei's advisor, Han Yu. The grudge between the two was attributed to a celebration banquet. Han Yu couldn't stand Fu Wang's success, so he secretly mocked him. He originally thought that Fu Wang was a boorish man who didn't understand and was scolded. Who would have thought that he was a cunning man on the outside and hated Han Yu? After that, Su Bei was killed by Jiang Pingji, and Fu Wang wanted to jump ship again. But halfway through, he was caught by Jiang Pingji's advisor, Qiguan Rang. The crazy fan spirit, who still fanned himself in the middle of winter, looked at Fu Wang with a smile. "General Fu, I haven't seen you for many years. How are you?" Fu Wang curled his lips and mocked back, "I'm very good. There's no cold in the winter anymore." Qiguan Rang threatened in a low voice, "When General Fu meets my lord, you'd better think about what you say, lest you lose your head." Fu Wang didn't believe it, but in the end he was taught a lesson by Jiang Pingji. He relived the years when he was suppressed and beaten by Fu Yang. Someone said to Jiang Pingji, "He's just a lackey. How can we trust him so easily?" Jiang Pingji said, "He can't kill me. If he dares to betray me, he'll die earlier than me." The outside world thought that Fu Wang would continue to kill his boss and jump ship. Who would have thought that Jiang Pingji's life would be so tough? Speaking of which, Fu Wang's battle record was quite good. He almost never lost a battle. But his previous boss was too weak. No matter how fierce a general was, he couldn't save the situation from collapse. Not to mention, Fu Wang would occasionally slack smiley face, angle, underscore when the world was about to be settled. Fu Wang did something that shocked the world and caused the outside world to discuss it. He remarried his former beloved concubine as his legal wife. If one observed carefully, they would notice that after the appearance of his beloved concubine, all the women around Fu Wang gradually disappeared. She was the only one left. Taking a concubine as his wife? Ridiculous. Han Yu threw the invitation card away as soon as he saw it. He gave a small gift and did not show up himself. Do I need to discuss with them who I want to marry and sleep with? Too much nonsense. Instead of doing proper things, all they do is stare at people's backyard and 3 inches below their navels. Fu Wang cursed. Other than his lord, Jiang Pingji, and his beloved wife, he would not listen to anyone else. His wife sighed. "My previous experience was indeed criticized by others," Fu Wang said, "but what does this have to do with them? Did they sleep with me?" He slept with his own woman, but he didn't do anything shameful in broad daylight. What was an outsider talking about? His wife forced a smile. In fact, she had wondered why Fu Wang was so in love with her. Once, he even made her drink a dozen jars of wine to get information out of her. The answer was, "Beautiful." Fu Wang replied drunkenly, "Beautiful. Look at this face, look at these hands, look at these feet, I like everything." When his wife heard the answer, she felt much more at ease. She was grateful to Fu Wang for having a shelter in this chaotic world. She was not like a rootless duckweed drifting everywhere. Genius 1 second remember site address. Mobile version Chapter 1858. Jiang Yan's courtesy name was Huiping. The Book of Rites said that when a woman was about to marry, she would have her courtesy name. It meant that a woman could only have her courtesy name when she was of age and was about to get married. The character in Huiping meant rise, and also referred to marriage. That was why there was the phrase, waiting to be betrothed. However, this meaning took on another meaning when the first female emperor of the Jiang dynasty ascended to the throne and the new crown prince completed the ceremony. Even if I take it, no one will say it. After a long time, except for the history books, no one will remember this character. The coming-of-age ceremony was very complicated. Even though Jiang Yan's physique was different from ordinary people, she was still a little tired after being dug up from dawn until the moon was high in the sky. However, she did not complain no matter how tired she was. Today's ceremony was not bad at all. Jiang Yan knew very well that from today onwards, her mother would slowly retire. When she could truly hold her own and suppress all the civil and military officials in the court, she would abdicate and hand over power. From assisting the crown prince to the real emperor, the meaning and responsibility of the two were completely different. Jiang Yan knew the heavy responsibility on her shoulders from a very young age and had long regarded it as a part of her life. But I see that your highness is slightly happy. It is obvious that you like it. Other than Jiang Yan, there was also a slightly older youth in the hall. The youth was still wearing his court robes and looked slightly frail. Jiang Yan smiled. Of course I like it. I heard that mother prepared this character for a long time and hesitated for a long time before choosing it. Everyone in the court knew that His Majesty was terrible at naming things. In the early years, some ignorant officials wanted to give the younger generation in the family favor and shamelessly asked His Majesty to give them a courtesy name. In the end, it was always the scene of a car accident. No matter how many choices others made, His Majesty could always choose the most unpleasant one. Smiley face. Angle, the character, Huiping, was also very ordinary, but the meaning was simple and straightforward. It was not unpleasant to hear. It seemed that His Majesty really put in a lot of effort. Jiang Yan rolled up the sleeves of the youth's court robes in boredom. A few days ago, Grand Tutor came to me and told me about you. Don't you want to hear what he thinks of you? The young man raised his eyebrows and asked in surprise, Grand Tutor knows? He had even kept this matter a secret from his parents. His father and mother had always thought that he was close to the crown prince because he was placed in an important position. A few days ago, they had been nagging him about marriage, but the young man had found an excuse to dismiss them. His mother was still all right, but his father was an old fox who had walked through troubled times. The young man had always been a little proud of himself for deceiving his father, Feng Jin. He did not expect that someone would still find out. This person was also Her Highness's teacher. Based on the clues he had discovered over the years, the young man had also figured out the other identity of the other party. I know he's against it. My words at that time were a little harsh. I'm afraid I've hurt his feelings, the youth said. Worry leads to confusion. Grand Tutor, this is also the prince in your heart. Jiang Yan said indifferently, indeed. However, Grand Tutor is right. Feng Yu, are you really willing? As he asked, the conversation he had with Grand Tutor Wei Ci surfaced in his mind. Your Highness, do you know what the outcome will be if you choose Feng Yu? With Feng Yu's looks, he will definitely be an important official in the court in the future. How could he be willing? He was young and frivolous, making a promise without permission. What if he goes back on his word in the future? Grand Tutor, you're thinking too much. I'm the future ruler of the world. How can I be restrained by a man? It's enough that both parties are in love with each other. What else does Feng Yu want? One day, if he really has a change of heart, I'll secretly grant him a death sentence. The secrets of the royal family and the dignity of the emperor cannot be tarnished. Only the dead can keep their mouths shut. I can let him rise rapidly, but I can also consign him to eternal damnation. Life and death, honor and disgrace are in my hands. If he wants to rebel, it's up to me. Jiang Yan was conceited, but on some matters, she was calmer than her mother. Wei Ci was stunned for a moment, then asked, Is he willing? Jiang Yan asked doubtfully, Why not? Behind the scenes, he's the man of the emperor. In front of others, he's the second son of the Feng family. He's an important official who holds great power in the court and is deeply favored by the emperor. There are gains and losses. To get all this, he has to give up some things. For example, the inheritance of the clan, a normal marriage. If that doesn't work, I'll give him a male heir in the future and secretly bring him back to inherit the clan. The court today can't tolerate so much willfulness. If her mother, Jiang Pingji, did not give Wei Ci a proper name because of the situation, then Jiang Yan had never thought of giving Feng Yu a proper name. If it wasn't Feng Yu, it could be someone else. It wasn't like she had to be alone. She and Feng Yu were in love. Rather than saying that they liked each other, it would be better to say that Feng Yu was the man of the same age that she was most familiar with. They didn't hate each other. They were familiar with each other. She also had the confidence to control everything about Feng Yu without going overboard. For Jiang Yan, who only cared about politics, Feng Yu was the most effortless and worry-free choice. The country, the court, and the people were what she should be concerned about. A man was just a necessary condition for her to give birth to an heir. If Feng Yu hadn't taken the initiative to expose this layer of window paper, Jiang Yan also planned to get someone to find a suitable target in private. If she chose to do so, she would most likely kill him after using him. Jiang Yan needed a seed that could make her pregnant and give birth to a high-quality heir, not a man who would take care of the backyard for her. She didn't need any hidden dangers. However, Feng Yu was the son of an important minister in the court, Feng Zhen. He was also one of the heavenly sons. Since she could not kill him after using him, she could only keep him for future use. Feng Yu also agreed? Jiang Yan said, "He took the initiative to mention it to me. I feel that this person is very tactful. He was my study companion since I was young. It's good to know him well and use him. Anyway, I have to have an heir. Why not find someone who is pleasing to the eye, tactful, and can help? At least, I don't need to get to know him." Wei Ci sighed. Compared to his father, Feng Yu's ability to read people's minds surpasses his father. He understood Jiang Yan's thoughts. He took the initiative to give in and sacrifice himself in exchange for a favorable impression. I like to deal with smart people. Feng Yu is very tactful. There's no need to think too much. There's too much deception in the court. It's rare for someone to be willing to be honest with me. This feeling is quite refreshing. Jiang Yan said lightly, "Grand Tutor, you don't have to worry that I'll be at a disadvantage. No matter how clear Feng Yu is about my thoughts, I allowed him to see it. He can't turn it over." Faced with Jiang Yan's question, the youth Feng Yu smiled and held her hand to touch his face. To be by Her Highness's side has been my obsession in this life. Now that it has finally come true, why should I regret it? He was educated to give everything for the person in front of him. Feng Yu did the same. But he also had his own selfish motives. Other than himself, no one else could have closer contact with her. Feng Yu had thought that he would be an exception to her. Until Jiang Yan revealed the idea of looking for a good seed, he knew that he was wrong. With Wei Ci as an example, Feng Yu also knew what risks he would face if he dared to like the crown prince. In Jiang Yan's eyes, the political affairs would always belong to the first wife. He could only be a virtuous and capable second wife. Want to be promoted? He would only have a chance if he endured for more than 20 years until she abdicated. Even if the chance was slim, there was still a chance, right? Jiang Yan said, "Then remember what you said today. Otherwise, you will know how different I am from Mother." Mother would not kill Wei Ci, but she would kill Feng Yu. Feng Yu said respectfully, "I will remember." Jiang Yan dealt with most of the government affairs that had piled up for the day. Then she asked the servants to prepare hot water to bathe and wash up. When she came back, she said to Feng Yu, "It's late, let's settle down." Feng Yu's eyes flashed with a trace of astonishment. Seeing his reaction, Jiang Yan seemed to emphasize angrily, "After today, I am already an adult. What can I do? It was just sleeping with a man. As the crown prince, why couldn't she do it?" Feng Yu. As Crown Prince Jiang Yan's most trusted person, Feng Yu also had his own place to sleep in this palace. But today was different. He did not sleep in the side hall that he usually slept in, but in the main hall's main courtyard, on the crown prince's bed. The next day, Jiang Yan specially asked the servants to prepare red dates and white fungus soup for breakfast. She hated sweet food the most. Red dates had been on her blacklist for a long time. Suddenly hearing that Her Highness wanted red dates and white fungus soup, the kitchen was a little confused. Red dates, blood nourishing. The serving maid then remembered that Her Highness's period had just ended 2 or 3 days ago. But Her Highness's blood volume had always been very small. She usually left after 1 or 2 days. It shouldn't be to the extent that she needed to drink red dates to nourish her blood, right? I just suddenly wanted to taste it. Why do you think so much? Unlike Jiang Yan's deep hatred for red dates, Feng Yu was extremely fond of them. Yesterday, it seemed that even his mouth had the taste of red dates. Jiang Yan suddenly didn't hate it so much. She wanted to taste it when she got up in the morning, so she asked the servants to bring red dates and white fungus soup. The taste was not as strong as yesterday's, After drinking a bowl of red dates and white fungus soup, this thought floated in Jiang Yan's mind. After the coming-of-age ceremony, Jiang Yan's busy days became more and more intense. She was still the crown prince in name, but the government affairs she handled were no different from those of the emperor. The frequency of her mother's advice also increased. Mother's body is getting weaker. Jiang Yan's mood was indescribably complicated when she saw that her mother, whom she admired since childhood, was also weak and sick. Feng Yu said in a low voice, "It said that His Majesty privately ordered people to make new dragon robes 2 months ago, and the size is the same as your highnesses." The abdication of Jiang Yan had been rumored since the day she became an adult. This was a signal from His Majesty to test the officials. Now that even the dragon robes had begun to be made, it was obvious that the abdication was approaching. Jiang Yan said, "Mother wants to abdicate. All the officials know about this, but whether she can abdicate successfully, I'm afraid it won't be as mother wishes." She had long expected that her mother would make a big move before abdicating to remove the last obstacle before her ascension to the throne, but she never thought it would be such a big move. In one day, 2 of Jiang Yan's 3 blood relatives died, and the other one was half dead. When she heard that the Grand Tutor was forced by the rebellious officials to commit suicide in front of the palace, she felt as if she had fallen into an ice cellar, and an endless chill rushed from the soles of her feet to her brain. Wei Tsong. These 2 words seemed to be squeezed out of her molars. Feng Yu saw the strong killing intent bursting out of her eyes. "Your Highness," His Majesty summons. Feng Yu lowered his head and didn't look directly at Jiang Yan's face. He also knew that Jiang Yan probably didn't want anyone to see her expression right now. Jiang Yan's hands clenched into fists in her sleeves, and she stepped into the palace with a stiff posture like a wooden statue. A group of important officials knelt in front of the dragon bench. Her Majesty's face was pale and tired. She ordered Qiguan Rang to be the assistant minister and read out the imperial edicts that had been prepared long ago. Imperial edicts came one after another. Not only were there abdications and orders for Jiang Yan to ascend to the throne, but there were also punishments for the rebellious officials and traitors, including Wei Kong. Jiang Yan looked at her mother on the dragon bench, and not a single tear could be squeezed out of her sore eyes. Her mother had calculated every move and prepared a complete set of imperial edicts. Only the punishment for Wei Tsong had been passed down orally. But because she had never thought that Wei Tsong would be involved, much less that Wei Ci would die. Her mother, who had never failed in every endeavor, had lost miserably in the last round. She had truly lost everything. Wei Tsong was punished to guard the imperial mausoleum for 12 years and was not allowed to leave before the deadline. 12 years was enough for Wei Tsong to think things through, and it was enough for Jiang Yan to let go of her desire to kill him. Mother won't be around for long, and now she even wants to scheme against her daughter? So what if she wanted to kill Wei Tsong? Once the person in front of her, Long Yubin, became the late emperor, who in the world could stop her from killing a person? Her mother said, "If he really did kill him, you'd be the one regretting it." Jiang Yan said, "But he killed 2 of my family members." Her mother smiled bitterly. "It's not his fault alone. Your father and I also have unshirkable responsibilities. We've treated him badly, just like you." This was the first time Jiang Yan had heard the words "me" and "your father" from her mother's mouth. The moment she heard these 2 words, tears flowed out of her eyes like she was about to collapse. "I've really treated you badly. You should have lived for me." However, how could a person at the end of his rope still live? Before the morning sun rose, the funeral bell rang. Under the support of her officials, Jiang Yan became the rightful monarch. Mother didn't wait until the day the sun rose, nor did she wait for the opportunity to abdicate the throne and travel the world with that person. Jiang Yan held back her emotions. As she handled her mother's funeral, she ordered people to secretly handle Wei Ci's funeral rites. As for Wei Tsong, she didn't even want to hear his name. Not many people knew about her envy, jealousy, and indescribable hatred for Wei Kong. A farce took away 2 insiders. The only one left accompanied her through the most difficult period of her life. It was only when the coffin carrying her mother's body entered the imperial mausoleum that everything settled. Outsiders thought that there was only her mother's corpse in the coffin, but they didn't know that Jiang Yan had placed another corpse. If someone dug up Wei Si's grave at this time, they would discover that the corpse in the coffin had disappeared, leaving only a set of court robes. Did you see that? Jiang Yan left the imperial mausoleum. Before she ordered people to put down the dragon-snapping stone, she muttered to Feng Yu without rhyme or reason. Feng Yu replied, "This official saw it. This is the result of being too sentimental." Jiang Yan sneered. "As an emperor, why do you need so many unnecessary and burdensome emotions?" Feng Yu looked at the main tomb of the imperial mausoleum and sighed faintly. Although Wei Si's mistakes could prevent him from taking detours, it also increased many obstacles. He had thought that if Wei Si could endure until His Majesty abdicated the throne, he would be able to kick aside government affairs and ascend to the throne. Now, it seemed that his hopes were slim. The example of his parents had left a deep psychological shadow on His Majesty. He didn't know if he could get over it in this life. 12 years later, His Majesty looked at his daughter, who was reading late into the night, and let out a complicated sigh. Feng Yu said, "Your Majesty, did you go to see him today?" For so many years, Feng Yu had never dared to step on a landmine. He had always addressed Wei Tsong as he. His Majesty said, "I did. He's not young anymore, but he's still alone. He's as simple as before. He hasn't made any progress after so many years." Feng Yu was startled when he heard that. He was very familiar with Her Majesty, so he knew that her tone when she mentioned Wei Tsong was completely different from before. "I forbade him from stepping foot into the capital for the rest of his life, but I will give him a chance if his son is promising on account of his old friendship with the Grand Tutor." Feng Yu listened without saying a word. Her Majesty continued, "I quarreled with him. It was the only time in my life. I felt much better after saying what I wanted to say." She was jealous of her younger brother, but because of her status as the heir apparent, she had to learn to restrain her true emotions. After so many years, when she saw her blood relative again, she found her former jealousy somewhat laughable. Because, while she was jealous, envious, and loathed her younger brother, she also deeply loved him. He was the only thing her parents had left her. When she was young, she would definitely disdain to admit this, but when she was middle-aged, she felt that there was nothing to hide. Feng Yu wasn't surprised to hear this. Her Majesty's study had a few paintings with Wei Tsong in them. If she really wanted to never see her younger brother again, would those paintings still be an eyesore to her? Another 14 years later, Jiang Yan abdicated the throne. Feng Yu said ruefully, "It wasn't easy, but I've finally made it." Jiang Yan had been on the throne for a few years longer than the former emperor. When she abdicated, she was healthy and without any illness. Chao Zhongwu had long changed his appearance. When he first came to Jiangnan, he heard that a famous painter of the Jiang dynasty lived in seclusion there. Jiang Yan and Feng Yu glanced at him from afar. Wei Tsong had inherited the Grand Tutor's appearance and temperament. From afar, it was as if that person had been reborn. "Your Majesty isn't going over?" Wei Tsong had traveled the mountains and seas with his wife, never knowing that someone sent by his sister was secretly guarding and protecting them. Jiang Yan retracted her gaze and indifferently turned around. "I don't want to see him." She had said that she wouldn't see him again in this life. She wouldn't easily break her promise. She was indeed relieved, but she didn't know how to interact and talk with her younger brother. After thinking about it, she felt that it wasn't good. Genius 1 second to remember this website's address. Mobile version. Chapter 1859. The imperial censors of the Jiang dynasty were a very strange group. From the emperor to the officials and even the commoners, there was almost nothing they did not dare to offend. They dared to offend the Grand Secretary of the Jiang dynasty and the Grand Marshal who controlled millions of troops. They offended the heavens, the earth, and the air. If they were really provoked, they would even dare to remonstrate to death. They were probably the least afraid of death in the Jiang dynasty and could even take pride in remonstrating to death. However, the politics were clear and the emperor did not give them a chance. Because they were born in the year of the crab, they were the typical type of people who walked sideways, so they were not very popular. However, there was a saying that even a homebody had 3 friends. These imperial censors naturally had their own friends and social circle. A certain imperial censor was squatting at home writing a memorial to the throne. He was currently polishing the content. He wanted to use the simplest language to explain the whole thing clearly. It could not be helped. It was not easy to be an imperial censor these days. A while ago, the picky emperor criticized them for wasting words. Not only the imperial censor, but the memorials and secret memorials of other local officials were also criticized by the emperor and publicly sentenced. That local official probably wanted to show his existence to the emperor and sent 2 or 3 memorials to pay respects in a month. January, how are you, Your Majesty? It is snowing here. Today, I ate 3 more bowls of rice for the auspicious snow and a good harvest. You should eat more too. February, how are you, Your Majesty? In a few days, it will be Your Majesty's birthday. Your subject will kowtow in the direction of the capital, wishing Your Majesty a long life and a happy birthday every year. March, how are you, Your Majesty? The flowers here are blooming. I found one while walking today and broke it to send it to you. April, how are you, Your Majesty? Spring plowing is over and summer planting is about to begin. I am working hard for the people today. October, how are you, Your Majesty? Today, I saw a good harvest and ate 2 more bowls of rice. The rice is very fragrant. Do you want to mail 2 caddies to you? November, how are you, Your Majesty? Are you there? After summarizing the performance this year, I found that the lives of the people in the county have improved a lot. December, how are you, Your Majesty? The new year is coming. How are you, Your Majesty? I have been working hard for the people for the past 2 days and caught a cold and fell sick. This was a rather cute memorial. Although it was a lot of nonsense and was suspected of acting cute, there was at least a little bit of substance. Some were simply, Magistrate, hello, Your Majesty, are you there? Your Majesty, yes, what's the matter? Magistrate, hello, Your Majesty, are you there? His Majesty? Your Majesty, I'm here, what's the matter? Magistrate, hello, Your Majesty, are you there? His Majesty, speak if you have something to say. What's the point of always asking if I'm here or not? Whether it was those who acted cute or boasted, or those who played the recorder, they were all pulled out by His Majesty for a long time, which resulted in an increase in the workload of the imperial censors. Not only did they have to pay attention to the officials and monitor the emperor, but they also had to describe the movements they discovered in simple and straightforward terms. However, this was the pleasure of the imperial censor. There was no need for outsiders to know. As he was writing, the housekeeper outside said that a friend he hadn't seen for a long time had come to visit. The imperial censor happily put down his brush and went to receive his friend. Before he entered the main hall, he heard his friend covering his face and sobbing. He hurriedly asked, "What's going on?" The imperial censor's friend was also an official, but he was a low-ranking official. His friend cried, "It's so hard." Fu Jingtu took advantage of his power to commit murder. There is no justice in broad daylight. Imperial censor? Fu Jingtu? Wasn't he the Grand Marshal who was greatly favored by His Majesty and the leader of the generals? He was a ruthless man. Did he beat me up? His friend cried and nodded. His whole face was bruised and bruised. It was a miserable sight. The imperial censor said angrily, "This Fu Jingtu." His friend came to find him in the hope that he could use his power to report this matter to His Majesty and the heavens. And the imperial censor did so. This was the capital, not the border, and not Fu Wang's military camp. He couldn't do as he pleased under the emperor's feet. Little did he know that Fu Wang didn't hide the fact that he had committed murder. He had done it openly and brought his children to the imperial censor's door. Fu Wang beat up the old, and his children beat up the young. The next day, the imperial censor who had called Fu Wang had a tacit understanding. However, Fu Wang wasn't afraid at all. He looked as if he had hit the right person. He really didn't think that he had hit the wrong person. Even when Hui Jun asked him to keep the peace, he didn't give in. It was rare for him to take a tough stance. Hui Jun smiled bitterly. "General, why are you doing this? There's no need to offend so many imperial censors just for me." Fu Wang said fiercely with a straight face, "You're a woman. Just listen." Hui Jun glanced at him fiercely. Fu Wang immediately cowered. "Madam, you don't know. This is called teaching by example." He was teaching his child what to do and what not to do. This was what an alpha wolf should do. Hui Jun sighed. "But I don't care anymore. General, the story had to start from the birth of the twins. The son was called Fu Xen and the daughter was called Fu Zhen. This pair of twins was a tyrant among their peers. They took after their mother in looks, but their father in height. They were always a head taller than their peers. The son was not of age yet, but he was taller and more muscular than many of his uncles. He was handsome and elegant, and his eyes carried a romantic charm. The daughter was tall and well-proportioned, and her looks were the best among her peers. Their father was very protective of his shortcomings, and the uncles doted on them. Not only that, the old master of the Liyun family, Xie Qian, also favored Fu Zhen and was very close to the children of the Liyun family. With such conditions, who dared to provoke them? But it did not mean that they were not wronged. 2 days ago, there was a rumor that Hui Jun had been a prostitute at a young age. Some youths who could not stand the sight of the twins deliberately provoked them. Although the provocation was subtle, the humiliation was not lacking. They asked which benefactor Fu Zhen and Fu Xian's father was. This question almost made them explode. Fu Xian's personality was like Huijuan's, gentle and honest. Fu Zhen was strong, but she was still a girl who had just reached marriageable age. When a pervert asked her if she would inherit her mother's business in the future, and even said that he wanted to be a guest in her tent, Fu Zhen was so angry that her eyes turned red. The two of them got into a conflict with the other party, but the other party brought many thugs and they could not gain any advantage. Fu Wang returned from the military camp and saw his daughter's grievance and son's humiliated expression. He could not help but ask in detail. The moment he asked, he exploded. King old man. Are you dead? Fu Wang could not help but press his son to the ground and beat him. Mother was humiliated, and you couldn't even protect your sister. You ran home with your tail between your legs? The Fu family does not have such a coward. Fu Xen was so ashamed that he could not help but slap himself to apologize to his father. Fu Wang said, "Learn from this, both of you." Thus, Fu Wang brought his 2 children to fight. When they arrived, the family was eating. Fu Wang kicked the table and beat up the old one, while Fu Zhen and Fu Xen beat up the young one who had spoken so rudely. After the beating, the family was in a mess. Fu Wang was still angry. "You have to protect your mother. Don't say such despicable things. If you say a word of disrespect, remember, it's basic to cripple her. If you kill her, it's your father's fault." Fu Wang, who doted on his daughter the most, was now venting his anger. "No matter what, your mother is the one who gave birth to you. If she can't even protect you, what's the point of raising you? What's the point of giving birth to you?" Fu Wang was traumatized by giving birth. Until now, he still avoided thinking about Huijuan's appearance when she gave birth. Whenever he thought about how the 2 children came about, he loved Huijun even more. Huijun was his true love. Children were an accident. Do you understand? The children could not even protect their mother. They were a disgrace to Fu Wang. Were they still wolf pups? Even dog pups were not so weak. Dogs don't think their mothers are ugly, and children don't think their families are poor. How did they do it? They didn't even know how to talk back, and they couldn't even fight back? Fu Wang really had the urge to put the children back in the furnace. Don't make them a disgrace. Of course, he knew about Huijuan's past, but so what? Those old men slept with him and gave birth to his children? They were not very capable, but they were good at gossiping. Did they really think that Fu Wang was not a wolf just because he had not fought for many years? If he really wanted to mess with these people, he would make them regret their ancestors for 18 generations. Fu Wang, who was full of anger, was not someone to be trifled with. On that day, the court officials saw the rare scene of Fu Wang confronting the imperial censor. That's amazing, Marshal Fu. Han Yu murmured to himself as he watched. He looks simple-minded but is actually treacherous. It was rare to misjudge. As a result, the court was full of gunpowder. Fu Wang almost got into a fight, and His Majesty finally intervened. Hui Jun listened to the gossip, but the smile on her lips became more and more intense. Fu Wang was indeed rude and not gentle enough, but it was rare for him to be so sincere. How could she not like him? But I can't let him be too complacent, lest he becomes arrogant again and wants a yard after taking an inch. She was old, but she was still as impatient as a young boy. Sometimes when her children came to pay their respects, she could only say that she had a cold. She was too embarrassed to tell the real reason. Hui Jun had been doing business for years. From the original textile to the present, she was involved in many industries. Naturally, she had her own means to gain a foothold in the business world. This time, she had investigated the rumors. Of course, she had to fight back against the deliberately disgusting means of the opponent. There were various means of competition in the business world, but it was too much to reach out to her children and try to drive a wedge between them. She couldn't help but squint, and her beautiful eyes were flashing with cold, killing intent. Fu Wang was reprimanded by His Majesty and went home. Hui Jun had just returned. I just went to the Feng mansion to talk to Feng Huizhang about something. Fu Wang was speechless. What did she have to say to him? Fu Wang's impression of Feng Huizhang, who was also known as Feng Gui, was limited to his colleague, Feng Jin's biological brother, as well as the head of the Feng family, who had helped his wife earn a lot of money. He did not care much about anything else. Why did she suddenly mention him? Hui Jun was speechless. She felt that she was wasting her breath. General, please don't interfere in the previous matter. If you delay your future, my heart will ache. Fu Wang was too embarrassed to tell her that he had been reprimanded by His Majesty and had been fined half a year's salary. That won't do. We still don't know who the villain who spread the rumors is. Fu Wang hugged her waist and sighed inwardly at how good it felt. Everything was good. Hui Jun said, I have my ways. That kind of evil person, there will be evil people to deal with. She wasn't as despicable as the other party. She would solve business conflicts with business methods. She wouldn't be so immoral. Even when a beauty didn't smile, she was so beautiful that it made one's mouth dry. Once she smiled, it was even more difficult to control. Seeing that the sky was almost dark, she carried Hui Jun into the house. Madam, it's a break tomorrow. He had been punished by His Majesty to reflect on his mistakes in seclusion for 7 days. Hui Jun could only roll her eyes. She put her fair feet on his waist and reminded him, we still have business to discuss tomorrow. Fu Wang replied casually, all right, I know what I'm doing. Madam, don't worry. Hui Jun watched as he lifted her skirt and curled her lips in her heart. This fellow still didn't know what propriety was even after so many years. Fu Wang had long been mesmerized by that pair of long, straight legs. That face, those fair hands, those long legs. He could like them for a lifetime. Fu Wang expressed his passion and preferences without reservation. Normal people would have just finished their meals and were busy working overtime. For example, Feng Gui was a typical example. The Feng family had changed their ways over the years. While upholding the family's integrity, they also developed other avenues. Regardless of whether it was the direct line of descent or the side branches, their lives were improving at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ultimately, it was because they had too much money. The current His Majesty's attitude towards business was to rectify, support suppression, and at the same time further promote the system of this industry. As a big shot in this industry, Hui Jun had a wide range of businesses. Naturally, Feng Gui had many dealings with her. Occasionally, there was competition, but more often than not, they worked together to earn money and exchange what they needed. The methods they used were all approved by their superiors. Although they weren't profiteering, they accumulated over the years. Over the years, money had been rolling in, and they had paid a lot of taxes to the national treasury. Everyone else thought that Hui Jun's backer was Fu Wang, but Feng Gui knew that this woman's true backer was the current emperor. Not long ago, Hui Jun came to him and said that she wanted to use a vicious method to suppress a certain opponent. This was the direction in which she wanted to kill her opponent. Hence, here came the problem. Should he help? Or not? Today, the leader of the Feng family was also vexed over trivial matters other than his younger brother. Genius in a second, remember this site's address. Mobile version. Chapter 1860. The Great Empress's Guide to Live Streaming. Please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1861. 100 years of life was like a long dream. The past flashed past her eyes quickly. Jiang Pingji sighed with satisfaction. She held his hand and walked to the finish line. The finish line? She felt her body being sucked in by a force of gravity. After a moment of dizziness, a viscous liquid surged toward her from all directions. Jiang Pingji opened her eyes subconsciously. What entered her eyes was a light pink liquid. She could not help but move her hands and feet. She was floating in the pink liquid, and the pink liquid was poured into the transparent nutrition cabin. The material of the cabin was completely transparent. The white light in the room shone on her face through the liquid. There was not a trace of warmth. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She controlled her right hand and stretched it in front of her eyes. Her fingers fiddled with the pink liquid. Her skin felt very sensitive. Jiang Pingji not only saw her fingers, but also her long red hair that was floating in all directions. She turned her eyes and found dozens of strange antennae connected to her skin. There was something wriggling in the thin tubes. Probably because she had stayed in ancient times for too long, when she lifted her feet and saw her bare legs, the first thought that came to her mind was that some bastard had taken off her clothes. Jiang Pingji turned around in the liquid. Her toes moved slightly, and her whole body swam forward. Her body was full of strength that she had not felt for a long time. Every inch of muscle and every cell was young and energetic. She raised her hand and put her 5 fingers on the transparent cabin. She did not feel the expected coldness. Instead, it was warm and delicate, like human skin. Jiang Pingji could not help but bend her fingers and knock. She did not use much strength, but the cabin actually sounded a red alarm. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She looked at the red light in the room, which was squeaking in surprise, until a transparent screen appeared in front of her. You just woke up and you are so energetic. It seems that you have recovered well. An unfamiliar red-haired man appeared on the screen. He had a high nose and deep eyes. His eyes were crimson, and he looked very exotic. Jiang Pingji blinked her eyes and opened her mouth to form 2 words. Skybrain? The man laughed. It seems that you have not completely forgotten your identity. I thought that you would need some time to recuperate after going through a long time travel. You can still recognize people, which means that you have maintained your state well. It is not a big problem. Jiang Pingji looked at the man without saying anything. At this moment, the door of the laboratory opened automatically, and a few men and women in white coats walked in. One of them pressed the switch on the cabin. The antennae that were originally connected to Jiang Pingji's skin shrunk. Jiang Pingji did not feel any change. In the next second, the pink liquid in the cabin trembled slightly, and the liquid level slowly dropped. As the liquid descended and disappeared, Jiang Pingji, who was floating in the liquid, changed from floating to standing. With a ding, the cabin door opened. Jiang Pingji coughed and wiped the liquid off her face. I say. To these people, Jiang Pingji had only slept for a few months or a year or 2, but Jiang Pingji's soul had truly experienced more than 100 years. She had not spoken the galactic language for more than 100 years, so her accent sounded a little awkward. She said, "Can you give me a piece of clothing?" Although the elite researchers in front of her had no interest in the human body, she did not have the habit of running naked. Your Excellency, I am truly sorry. This was our oversight. A girl wearing round glasses came forward with a smile and handed her a large coat. It's okay. I'm just not used to it. Jiang Pingji waved her hand and walked out of the cabin with her bare feet. She wrapped the coat tightly around herself. She had just woken up and was still a little confused. She needed time to distance herself from her memory and figure out the whole story. Is there anything to eat? I'm hungry. She did not feel hungry, but she wanted to eat now. In fact, during the days she stayed in the cabin, her body's muscles maintained vigorous activity, and the nutrient solution did not end. Logically speaking, she did not need to eat, but since Your Excellency said she wanted to eat, they could only try their best to satisfy her. But, when Jiang Pingji saw the 2 nutrient solutions that were handed over, she was silent. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Was she that miserable? She was a great hero of the Federation, after all. It was too much to only give her 2 nutrient solutions as consolation. Alright, how many years had it been since she had taken a nutrient solution? It was like reliving the past. Jiang Pingji took it with a smile. She ate one and almost vomited. Was the commander of the Federation army not even worthy of a fruit-flavored nutrient solution? He actually gave her one that tasted like plasticine. She took a shower and changed into a new set of clothes. Someone pushed the equipment over to examine her. The most important items were genetic and mental tests. Data such as 3-dimensional height could be estimated by sight, but things such as genetic sequence codes and mental data tests were confidential. Of course, the personnel in front of her were all members of the Federation's top-secret research institute. One of them was even the director. With their authority, they could apply to look at Jiang Pingji's physical data. The fluctuations in her mental domain were more than 100 times stronger than before, and the genetic sequence codes had undergone earth-shattering changes. To be precise, it was atavism, inheriting the mysterious power of the ancient ancestors. Her comprehensive genetic data was almost the strongest at the moment. You're in good condition. You can leave after basic rehabilitation training and return to normal work. Jiang Pingji said, I would like to request to speak to the marshal. But she wanted a reward. She, Jiang Pingji, never suffered losses. It was not too much for her to ask for a personal reward after helping the Federation overcome a huge crisis and avoid destruction, right? It was indeed not too much. The marshal was not at all surprised by Jiang Pingji's communication request. Before Jiang Pingji applied for communication, the current Skybrain was talking to him. The Federation could agree to any conditions Jiang Pingji raised at their discretion. Any conditions? The marshal was a white-haired old man who looked like he was in his 70s or 80s. In fact, according to the current technological means of the Federation, it was not difficult to maintain a person's appearance in the prime of his life. Jiang Pingji had seen images of the marshal when he was young. His appearance was okay. It was just that the military believed that an older person would have a more comforting aura. The marshal's appearance was, a huge sacrifice. The old fox smiled amiably. Agree to it at your discretion. Agree to it at his discretion meant that he could ask for any reasonable conditions, and he should not ask for unreasonable conditions. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, The Federation needs my luck, right? The marshal said, Luck is very mysterious. Even though others think it's very mysterious, in fact, it's an intangible force that really exists and controls a civilization. The Federation really needs it now. This is also the reason why you were chosen to carry out the mission back then. Jiang Pingji was born to be an emperor and had an exuberant purple aura. Her spiritual domain was different from everyone else's. Jiang Pingji said, So, Your Excellency, my request is not to agree to it at my discretion. It must be agreed to. The marshal was not annoyed. He had experienced Jiang Pingji's temper in countless meetings. She was definitely a warmonger. Tell me. Jiang Pingji said, I want Wei Ci. The marshal smiled and squinted his eyes. Who is Wei Ci? Chapter 1862. Who was Wei Ci? That was a good question. Of course, he was the man she had slept with for 2 lifetimes. Jiang Pingji usually spoke without restraint. She had been the emperor for 2 lifetimes, so she wanted to say whatever she wanted. But she swallowed the words that were in her throat. It was not that the marshal was too old to listen to such words. She was just worried that Wei Ci would throw a tantrum if he found out. He's the man I like. Out of these concerns, Jiang Pingji changed the words that were on the tip of her tongue. She said confidently, "Don't you think that I have everything except for this person? As the only leader of the 10 armies who wants to be single, I believe that I can establish the values of marriage for the new generation of young people and save the pitiful marriage rate of the human federation." As a winner in life, she naturally had to crush others in all aspects, such as getting single. As a highly developed technological civilization, the Federation had reached a certain level in both culture and society. The Federation had a minimum salary limit and provided social pension subsidies for citizens who reached a certain age. Without the burden of childbirth, pension, or even livelihood, they wouldn't starve to death even if they didn't go out to work. When they reached a certain age, they could still not work and receive pension subsidies. Although this made some people develop the bad habit of laziness, it also freed the people of the Federation from the shackles of survival and made them pursue spiritual enjoyment. Work was not a means to make a living. It was a channel for them to pursue a better life and self. With this kind of social background and the liberation of childbirth, there were very few people who got married seriously. The number was dropping every year. Those who had the courage to register their marriage, without a doubt, were either completely true love or unbreakable business and political marriages. Many years ago, experts were worried that citizens would indulge in relationships and only enjoy love and applaud for love, unwilling to enter the graveyard of marriage. Later, they found that they were wrong. Because the mental stimulation received in real life was far less than in the virtual world. In reality, one had to move to applaud for love, but in the virtual world, one only had to close one's eyes and enjoy it. The sensory stimulation was more delicate and acute than in the real world. This led to citizens liking the lovers in the virtual world more, commonly known as virtual love partners. They worked during the day to improve their lives and went home at night to enjoy the most wonderful feeling with their paper lovers. It was simply wonderful. Happy my asterisk. Several generations of marshals had been worried about the declining marriage rate every year, and for this reason, they had even limited the simulation of the sky brain's virtual senses. In the early years, Jiang Pingji had thought that these old men had nothing better to do and were actually worrying about this matter. But later on, she no longer thought so. According to the massive genetic database collected by the Heavenly Brain, the genetic database of the Federation citizens was undergoing a subtle change. Human emotions and emotions were slowly deteriorating, and the average index of empathy was also decreasing bit by bit. This kind of change could not be seen in a few decades or centuries, but after 3,000 to 5,000 years, there would definitely be obvious changes. This was not a good thing for humans. Sky Brain carried out analysis and calculations of the massive amount of data and believed that family relationships could curb this trend. Therefore, the Federation has also begun to trick fathers or mothers into raising children, in order to increase family bonds and emotional exchanges. Of course, the Federation's protection of infants had always been thorough. When a father or mother interacted with their child, a parenting robot would assist them. It was not only for the sake of taking better care of the child, but also to reduce the harm and mistakes that parents might make in the process of parenting. As one of the leaders of the army, Jiang Pingji had the authority to know these secrets. The marshal was speechless. He knew that Jiang Pingji's ability to bullshit was one of the best among the leaders of the army, but he did not expect her to be so shameless. It was obviously for her own selfish desires, but in her words, it was a sacrifice for the marriage rate of the Federation. What a great way to put it. Jiang Pingji said, "Marshal, can you fulfill this small request?" The marshal crossed his fingers and did not speak. Jiang Pingji's face darkened. "Marshal, there are some things I already know. There's no point in hiding it." The marshal smiled. For example, I am the only direct descendant of the Jiang family. The Federation needs my luck, and the grudges between the Heavenly Brain, the Federation, and the Jiang family. For something like luck, there's no point in just squeezing me out, right? Jiang Pingji said with a clear expression, "I want Wei Ci from you because I know he must be here now." I have no intention of touching the interests of the Federation, and I don't care if you want to fleece me. After all, the Federation's position is also my position, but any cooperation requires sincerity, don't you think? She could sacrifice for the Federation, but she could not be squeezed to death without seeing any return. Jiang Pingji's request was very simple. If the Federation could fulfill it, why not? Cooperation was only meaningful when both parties were willing. Wei Ci was born with the fate of the phoenix, and he himself was the owner of a strong luck. Jiang Pingji dared to bet with her life. The Federation would never let go of such a fat sheep. Not only Wei Ci, but Jiang Pingji's children from her previous life, Jiang Yan and Jiang Lian, also had the fate of the emperor. How could the Federation let them go? When Jiang Pingji returned, their spiritual bodies would definitely be brought back. The marshal was pretending to be deaf and dumb, deliberately watching her worry about Wei Ci. To be honest, it was meaningless. The marshal said, "You are still so sharp." In other words, he admitted that Wei Ci was there. However, I did not deliberately watch you worry and keep you in suspense, but there are some things I don't know how to tell you about the matter of Wei Ci that you mentioned. The marshal still had a faint smile on his face. That smile gave Jiang Pingji a bad feeling. Her eyebrows suddenly jumped, and she secretly clenched her fists. "Marshal, please speak." The marshal said, "Do you know about congenital mental retardation?" Jiang Pingji, actually, in order to maintain the reproduction of the population, the Federation has been using artificial methods to interfere with reproduction. The marshal sighed. This method has been used for thousands of years, and it has become more and more perfect, but there are always exceptions. Natural reproduction will give birth to children with defective genes. Artificial methods can screen embryos with defective genes, but there is no guarantee that the embryos will be fine after birth. But according to the Federation's laws, children who mature and leave the artificial breeding cage have their own human rights, and no one can forcibly take them away. These children will be handed over to a specialized robot organization to take care of until they die of natural causes and reach the end of their lives. But life is not without miracles. Jiang Pingji nodded. What does this have to do with Wei Ci? The marshal smiled. No, it has a close relationship with him. Jiang Pingji, the marshal asked Jiang Pingji, "Do you still remember how you carried out the mission?" Jiang Pingji was speechless. She could not remember. She knew that her transmigration was a mission given by the Federation to capture the absconding sky brain, but how she transmigrated, how she received the order. This piece of memory seemed to be locked away, leaving only a vague trace. Her last memory before transmigration was of the explosion? "I remember. It seems that I transmigrated after the explosion?" The marshal said, "It seems that you don't completely forget it." Jiang Pingji asked, "Can you finish it in one go, marshal?" She did not have that much patience to squeeze the toothpaste out bit by bit. The marshal chuckled. "This is a bit long, I can't finish it in one go, you have to understand my age." The old man had to give him some time to catch his breath. "Jiang Pingji, I'd be a fool to believe you." Anyone who sat firmly in the position of the Federation marshal and wielded the blade of the emperor's head, which could restrain the sky brain, its nature was equivalent to the god-slaying blade, which could restrain the sky brain, a virtual spiritual body, would not be weak. The marshal looked old. If he really unleashed his little universe, Jiang Pingji would not dare to say that she could win. The marshal did not continue to delay and helped Jiang Pingji fill in the few days of her memory that she had missed. After Jiang Pingji received the classified mission, the garrison of the 7th Army Corps on a deserted planet sent an emergency signal for help. The so-called deserted planet was a planet where the exploitation of resources had reached the tipping point. Most of the aborigines had migrated to other planets. Those who stayed on the deserted planet were either nostalgic or unable to bear the cost of migration. The total population was not large. A sparsely populated planet was itself suitable for all kinds of confidential research. There were a few research institutes established by the Federation on this deserted planet. Jiang Pingji realized the seriousness of the situation and personally went to deal with it. What happened after that? Jiang Pingji raised her hand and pressed her head. Fragmented images appeared in her mind. Like a puzzle, they gradually became complete and revealed the whole picture. The marshal said, "It was the invasion of foreign hostile forces and they stole a lot of secrets." "You stopped it?" The marshal saw that she was worried and smiled to comfort her. "We stopped it. Don't worry about that. We found the stolen secrets from the spy who was hiding in the 7th Army Corps and ambushed you. They have been completely destroyed." Jiang Pingji's expression turned cold. "The spy hiding in the 7th Army Corps? Marshal, this is my dereliction of duty." No. If you really want to talk about dereliction of duty, it can be traced back to your predecessor. We can't guess the malice of the absconding Skybrain towards the Federation. Its behavior can even be regarded as deranged. The marshal said, in order to destroy the Jiang family and take revenge on the Federation, it planned for hundreds of years in advance and infiltrated various forces. If the Federation didn't discover its conspiracy in time and destroy it one by one, removing the spies and informers, the losses would be far greater than now. After Skybrain's conspiracy was discovered, it fled, but there were still fish that escaped the net that we didn't notice. The deserted planet A233 is the best example. Because of this, we almost lost you. The spy was truly loyal to the Federation. He was a trusted old man left behind by the previous commander. His final attack on Jiang Pingji was also his behavior under control. Jiang Pingji didn't notice anything unusual about him. It wasn't Jiang Pingji's fault. No one suspected him. Following the marshal's description, the memory box in Jiang Pingji's mind was opened. The missing parts were pieced together to form a complete picture. She studied all the ambushes, but Jiang Pingji had to bring people to rescue them. In the end, she was ambushed at a critical moment by someone around her. All the ambushes were detonated in an instant. With the power of the explosion at that time, it was enough to engulf an area with a radius of more than 1,000 miles and blast a huge pit. Regardless of anything else, more than 1,000 people in the research institute were dead. Jiang Pingji had brought all the equipment on her in order to rescue them. She could have left the center of the explosion in an instant and saved her life, but she chose the research institute. In other words, I should have died? But she was still alive. Jiang Pingji looked at her hands. They didn't look like they were regenerated in a short period of time. The marshal said, theoretically, that should be the case. If her spiritual body still existed, even if her body was destroyed, Jiang Pingji could still be saved. The problem was that in order to protect the research institute, she activated the extreme spiritual realm and moved the explosion to a relatively safe place in the deep sea through the space displacement device she carried with her. Her body wasn't much of a problem, but her spiritual body suffered an almost destructive blow. But I'm still alive. Moreover, I carried out the classified mission that the Federation gave me. The marshal said, this will change the topic to congenital mental retardation just now. Jiang Pingji was speechless. What did this have to do with congenital mental retardation? Life and miracles. When these two things collide, it will produce wonderful changes that humans can't even imagine. The Wei CI you mentioned should be a special subject of investigation by the Research Institute. The marshal showed Jiang Pingji a set of information. Jiang Pingji skimmed through it briefly and was silent. He continued, under normal circumstances, this kind of child with congenital mental gene problems will have a spiritual body that is almost as weak as a paramecium. But the 212,175 in the information has a strong congenital spiritual realm, comparable to the 4 genetic unlocking stage. Jiang Pingji said, and then? The marshal said, as you can see, he has a strong spiritual power, but he doesn't have any spiritual consciousness. It was impossible for one to have powerful mental strength and even condense a unique mental domain without a mental consciousness. He attracted the attention of various research institutes and became a subject of investigation. But after so many years, there were no results. Why didn't you release him if there were no results? Jiang Pingji saw clearly that 212,175 lived in the research institute for a whole 26 years. The marshal said, Do you know what his spiritual realm ability is? What? The marshal said, it's healing. It's the opposite of yours. Jiang Pingji's original ability was fire, but after awakening her ancient blood, she had the violent power to burn everything. He didn't stay in the research institute to be investigated. He was more of a part of the research institute, working to earn money. Jiang Pingji was speechless. When the research institute was attacked, 212,175 did not move. He was only protected by the robot nanny. Until the explosion happened. Jiang Pingji survived because she received help from an external force, which helped her share some of the damage. Why did he become Wei Xi? The marshal said, you have to know that his control of the spiritual realm is based on instinct. He can't be compared to you. It's like a child who has great strength but can't use it to its full effect. He also suffered a great mental impact. Time was tight. Coupled with the request of the entire research institute, we put your spirit and his into the mission coordinates together. Originally, we hoped that he could be reborn in another world. It was a reward for a hero, but we didn't expect him to develop self-awareness. The marshal said, when you completed the first stage of the mission, we wanted to extradite him back, but his spiritual body developed a strong resistance. Instead, he entered the second stage of the mission with you. I have to say, fate is amazing, isn't it? The marshal said with a smile, fate is indeed amazing. According to the information sent back by the original research institute, this 212175, or Wei Ci, does not have any spiritual consciousness and is unable to sense the outside world. However, he unexpectedly likes your image. After that, we dug deeper into him and found that the fate between you and him seems to be far more than that. Jiang Pingji asked, there are other inside stories. The marshal said, you've carried out many missions during the years you were a genetic warrior. I'm afraid you don't even remember many things. But the video record is eternal. After Skybrain helped analyze it, we found a very interesting video. Jiang Pingji received the record sent by the marshal. The corresponding memory appeared in her mind. Jiang Pingji's eyes showed some shock. She had been ruthlessly betrayed. The person who betrayed her was a comrade she met in the genetic warrior training camp. He was a traitor who betrayed the Federation's important secrets for his own selfish desires. Because of the leak of secrets, the front line collapsed. Jiang Pingji entrusted her back to him, but he almost caused her to lose her life. The traitor even framed Jiang Pingji and made her the scapegoat. The Federation issued an arrest warrant. Jiang Pingji was unwilling to resign herself to death, so she used force to break out of the encirclement and escape. She crossed several planets and persevered to kill the traitor. She wanted to give an explanation to the soldiers who died in vain and prove her innocence. She killed the traitor before he boarded the spaceship outside of the country. She conveniently obtained important evidence to prove her innocence. Although she proved her innocence, because she resisted arrest and killed her comrade. No one could deprive a traitor of her life before the authorities officially convicted her. Jiang Pingji was forced to retire from the ranks of genetic warriors. She entered the 7th Corps as an ordinary federal soldier. This was the background of the video. Jiang Pingji was hiding from place to place. She wandered around several planets. Her chest was filled with endless hostility. When she woke up and went to sleep, it was as if she was possessed. There was only one thought in her mind: catch the traitor and grind his bones to ashes. When she passed by a deserted planet, Jiang Pingji hid near a nursery and met a little boy. It was a very beautiful little boy. His smile was clean and pure. It reminded her of the blue sky and blue sea on the central planet. The little boy with black hair and eyes was somewhat reclusive. He sat quietly and did not speak or pay attention to anyone. Jiang Pingji was on the verge of breaking down. If she could not catch the traitor, she would probably have nowhere to run. At that moment, the little boy, who was suspected to be deaf and mute, suddenly responded. "What's your name? Can I be your friend? Big sister, you're so beautiful. Have you eaten? The weather is so good today." Questions like these floated out from the intelligent brain screen on his wrist. Coupled with his smiling face, it was impossible to resist. Jiang Pengji did not know at that time that these questions and dialogues were actually content that was automatically simulated by the preschool education textbook according to the situation. It was not the little boy's intention to open it accidentally. Jiang Pengji answered them one by one. Her anxiety was greatly alleviated. Finally, a paragraph of words appeared on the little boy's screen. "Big sister, what's your wish?" Jiang Pengji grabbed her hair and said disappointedly, "Does the peace of the Federation count? Other than this, there's nothing else." The little boy did not speak. He was still smiling. Finally, Jiang Pengji dug in her pocket and took out a candy and stuffed it into the little boy's hand. "Your nanny robot is nearby, right? Go home early. You'll be abducted and sold if you're too beautiful." Before leaving, she rubbed her fluffy hair. Jiang Pengji put on her hood to hide her figure and disappeared. After a few minutes, the nanny robot appeared. The little boy's preschool education textbook found a new target. A bunch of questions popped up on the screen again. "What's your name? Can I be your friend? Big sister, you're so beautiful. Have you eaten? The weather is so good today. What's your wish?" Jiang Pengji was speechless. "There's something I have to remind you of. There is something that this old man has to remind you of." Jiang Pengji was speechless. The marshal said with a smile, "This is a minor. Even now, she is only 28 years old. Do you understand?" Jiang Pengji was speechless. Please remember the domain name of this book. Jiutian Shunhuang mobile version that you're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.